doing this to one person only. We're actually minimizing distractions. So please say your hellos now if you want to on the chat, but we don't want to have a separate conversation while the speaker is teaching. And it's better if we pay attention to the speaker than to ourselves. So at the end, if he has questions and answers, we ask that you guys unmute yourselves and ask the question. It's usually easier that way. But depending on how we're rolling with time, we might just open the chat again just for the questions, and then he will pick whatever he can answer with the time that he has given. Last but not least, you can invite anyone. You can send the link to anyone that you think might benefit from today's message. So go ahead and send that text right now, and let's get started. Oh, last thing. This is very important. Paper and pen so that we can take notes, because these classes are amazing. So that's it for this side of town.
Thank you, Gigi. The weather here is rainy on this side of town too. Anyhow, well, I'm so happy to see everyone here today. We're super, super, super excited. Actually, I was looking at my notes on June 20th, 2020, we had Dr. Emmons come in and he spoke to us about gratitude. So who was here? Who listened to him when he came on June 20th? Like, you know, so if you guys did not hear him back then, we encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and listen to his teaching. Was amazing. I was looking at my notes, and look at Susan with all her notes from that day.
He is the preeminent teacher in the whole world on gratitude. So go back to the YouTube channel if you want to listen to what he taught about.
So it's, you know, it's a gift. Somebody's gifting Hope for Life for him to come. He's truly financially out of our league, but somebody, it's been very generous, and now this is the second time they bring him. So let's take advantage of the time. I know some of us, because we are at home, we get distracted. We want to be cooking, doing things. Some of us have to. If you have to, that's okay. But I encourage you that you give yourself this time. I mean, these are wonderful speakers that are pouring into our lives. So try to take advantage of what's going on.
But also for some of the new people who's never been to Hope for Life before, one of the, in our life cycle, which is 1 year, on our classes that we teach on emotional healing every year in and out, we spend, I think, 18 hours or 15 hours just on that one subject, forgiveness, and what it really looks like. Because forgiveness is not forgive and forget. Forgiveness is not, it's okay. Forgiveness is not, it didn't happen. Because a lot of people think it's that, but I just wanted to clarify that.
So today he's gonna come, and like he said, he's gonna be talking on forgiveness. But last time he spoke to us about gratitude. And one of the things that he says, and he opened up with, he said, gratitude works. Like my daughter will say, gratitude works, period. And, you know, the definition today for gratitude is gratitude, an affirmation of the good and recognition of the sources of the good. I think that is such a wonderful definition of gratitude. He also said one of the keys to sustaining happiness is to be able to focus on what we are grateful for. These are just little reminders in case you forgot what he said that time. Gratitude is a vaccine. It's an antiseptic. You know, gratitude, it's a wonderful thing. He says the cost is few and the benefits are plenty. He says it is available to everyone. Gratitude is good news. Gratitude is an universal currency. You can never run out of it. Gratitude, and I think Gigi came up with this, it said, gratitude God's attitude. So gratitude is also God's attitude. And, there's so many benefits on being grateful. And, he went, I mean, go back and look at it. I was looking at my notes and I was like remembering, wow, this was such an amazing class. All the benefits for our health, just that alone, it's a no-brainer. And again, today he's going to talk to us about forgiveness.
And I just want to make a confession. From June 20th till now, how many times I've forgotten to be grateful, So in case of any of you don't remember how to be grateful, you can revisit the class,
Well, yeah. So, but anyhow, just a reminder that, gratitude works. We're getting ready and we're waiting for Dr. Emmons to join us.
I'm here.
Oh, Dr. Emmons,
Oh,
good morning.
welcome.
You're here. Take it
Good
over.
morning. Good morning from the left coast.
We were talking about you behind your back.
My ears were on fire.
Well, welcome back. We are super
you.
excited. I was just making a little review of all the good stuff we got from last time you were with us.
Well, then don't let me interrupt.
It's so exciting to have you here. And again, today, we can't wait to see what you're going to talk to us. Forgiveness is, especially, I think, in the times that we're living in. And,
Yes.
there's so much confusion. There's some states that's very chaotic right now. And a lot of hatred, anger, resentment. I think it couldn't have not come at a better time, to speak and to learn more, to dive more into what forgiveness is. So again, with open hearts, we welcome you and we are so happy that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so good to be back with you again. You're right. Those are very, very big issues and very pressing issues. And I wish I had answers for them, but I'm just one person. The saying goes in the scripture, we're just beggars helping other beggars find food, and forgiveness is a very interesting topic. Let me ask you this question just to get us started. And I can see most of you on my screen, so you could just raise your hand. How many of you were in the class when I spoke back in June? Okay, most of the hands went up. Now you've already been a little bit, you've actually been given the answer already. I was going to ask you if you remember what I talked about. And I think you did, because you were told about gratitude. And so it's good to be back. Gratitude does work, as we learned. It's really vital to a sense of well-being and who we are and living our best lives. And, as I mentioned back then, I guess that's been hard to believe it's been 3 months, and a lot has happened, of course, around the world in 3 months. Well, if I had to line up, if I had to sort through all of my topics that I'd like to teach about and write about and talk about in my classes and so forth, obviously gratitude is number one and has been. But a very close second, in fact, would be forgiveness. And that's our topic for today. I can envision circumstances where if things had turned out differently 20 years ago, I might have become the forgiveness guy instead of the gratitude guy. Turns out what happened was that the first grant proposal that I submitted on forgiveness was not funded. It was flatly rejected, and thank God for that, because that opened the door to study gratitude instead of forgiveness. And it was a very interesting grant. It was like cell biology and DNA repair and all these things that I really don't understand, so I'm kind of good. I'm kind of glad that it worked out that way, because I'm not sure I could have pulled that off. Anyway, in some respects, forgiveness is really the flip side to gratitude. Let me explain what that means. So with gratitude, as you recall, it's magnifying the good, right? It's turning up the volume, amplification of the good in our lives and the good that we see around us. Well, forgiveness is turning down the volume on the bad, right? It's the diminishment of the bad. And we'll see shortly how that is the case. So you can really think of them as, like two sides of the same coin, because not only do we need to celebrate, notice the good, look for the good, take in the good, but we also sometimes have to turn down the volume on the bad, on the hurts, on the grievances, not giving back bad when we receive bad, right? So really forgiveness is in many respects counterintuitive or countercultural. It's just so natural for our biology to respond the way we've been responded to, right? To return hurt for hurt, but with forgiveness, you're returning good for hurt. And I think that's what makes it so intriguing, but also so challenging for people and really supernatural for most people. And in fact, I have some data to show you that people really can't do it on their own. They need help. And oftentimes this help comes from above. So it's a great topic. It's a fascinating topic. Much like gratitude, forgiveness is really foundational and fundamental to the faith. It's really the focus of the Christian faith. And of course, it's the focus of other faiths as well. There's been books and lots of books written on forgiveness within various spiritual traditions and perspectives. And I was trying to sort through all of this stuff in the last few days, preparing for this message this morning with you guys. And I thought to myself, what have I gotten myself into? There's just so much out there. You've heard the proverbial saying, trying to get a drink of water from a fire hose. That's kind of like what it is, trying to understand forgiveness, especially when you bring in both spiritual in the scriptures and also the scientific information that we've learned about forgiveness. And there's been a lot of stuff in those last 20 years that since the science of forgiveness really took off in the late 1990s. I can only give you a little introduction today, an invitation to what I've learned, what I think is important, perhaps some things that can be useful for us as we live a life and where we have to, forgive other people and also ask for forgiveness. And so that's my plan for today. Talk first about forgiveness in Scripture a little bit, just to give us a good mooring, a good foundation, and then look at the science of forgiveness. And then also toward the end, talk about some of the practices, how we can put this information into practice. Okay, does that sound all right? So that's the game plan for today. We can pull that off. And it's still dark here, by the way. So it was great coming to work at 6:10. There was nobody on the streets. I never got to work so fast. So I appreciate your grace, by the way, and letting me start at 6:30 instead of 6 o'clock. So anyway, why don't we get started? And I actually want to start. I'm going to go to share screen. Hopefully this will work okay.
Yeah, I made you co-host so you could share the screen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. If, by the way, I want to show a couple of video clips at some point, and sometimes I forget to enable the audio from the computer. So if something's not happening, just jump in and let me know we can't hear anything. So, okay. So this is where I want to begin with Scripture. It's often a good place. Not often. I think it is a good and appropriate place to begin with Scripture. And this is from Luke's Gospel, chapter 4. He went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And on the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, "Today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." And may God add his rich and profound blessing to this reading of his holy and inspired word. Well, this is a place where Jesus tells us, everyone, really why he came, what his mission statement is, what his job description is, right? And I love this scripture because it's really just kind of summed up in just a few sentences, okay? To proclaim good news to the poor, freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, right? To bring grace, to bring mercy, to bring forgiveness. It's interesting. He shows up in his hometown, right, where he was raised, goes to the temple, and he's handed the scripture, like the daily scripture, the reading for the day. And basically what he says is that, you know, this prophecy that was written several centuries before in the book of Isaiah, this is coming true today, that he is fulfilling this prophecy. So, you know, what he says is that, I'll go to the next screen, right? This scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. I'm the guy that Isaiah is talking about, right? This is what I've come to do. So I imagine, you know, it was a pretty exciting day in Temple back then. And this is really awesome because this encapsulates really the entire Bible, I think. And as I've gotten a little bit older and heard different perspectives on, you know, trying to make sense out of the Bible and the fact that, you know, everything in the Bible from the Old Testament to the New Testament really talks about Jesus and who Jesus is and what Jesus has come to do. And so, you know, as Christian people, we worship a God who's in the business of bringing freedom, freeing the captives, right? That's what he does. That's who he is. And this is really exemplified in this particular scripture. Now, I have a friend who actually is in your neck of the woods, preacher. His name is Tullian Tchividjian. Some of you may be familiar with him. And he says that the Bible is, listen to this, the Bible is one long story of God's replacing our faults with his forgiveness, our guilt with his grace, our badness with his goodness, our rebellion with his rescue, our sin with his salvation, right? Christianity is fundamentally about replacement. It's about substitution. It's about bringing freedom in our lives, liberating us from our past so that we can live a life of fullness and flourishing and freedom and all of those good things. And certainly the Bible is saturated with a message of forgiveness. And you just can't avoid it. It's throughout, examples and exemplars and exhortations. And really that's really what it's all about. And that's what today's message and talk and is all about. I'm going to, again, try to share with you some of the things that I've learned in my study of forgiveness and what the scientists have told us, what forgiveness is. You know, we need to examine that as well, because a lot of times, especially those who are not familiar with more of a spiritual perspective, but just forgiveness as an interpersonal phenomena, especially in relationships, have certain ideas about forgiveness. And some of those ideas are accurate and correct, but there's also, I think, some misconceptions and some distortions about the proper way to think about forgiveness. And so that's the kind of thing that I want to share with you today. Now, there's a lot of stuff, as I mentioned, just overwhelming amount of journal articles, scientific research, books written for professionals, books written for the average person. Here's just a small sample, right? I mean, and my shelves are filled with books. Actually, I took a lot of books off the shelf because it gave the impression that I actually had read them all. So I tried to simplify the background a bit. Anyway, these are some of the books that I used to have on my shelf. And you see, a lot of it is written by counselors, people who are trying to help those who are in the midst of dealing with pain, with trauma, with issues that they've had. And how do you move forward? How do you forgive others? What does it mean to be, you know, forgiven by God? How does that impact our relationships on the horizontal plane? Forgiveness is a choice. That's a good one right there. Moving forward, a book written by a friend of mine, Everett Worthington Jr. Probably he's done more for the science and practice of forgiveness than anyone. It's about forgiving yourself. And so that's a very intriguing question and area of research as well. What's the similarity and difference from forgiving others versus forgiving yourself? And is it actually harder to forgive yourself than to forgive other people? That could be the case. And why would that be the case? All right, Forgive for Good. Dr. Fred Luskin in the lower left there, that's a book written. He's given lectures all over the Bay Area at Stanford University. He's been a lecturer and has written about how forgiveness is necessary for health and happiness and fullness and flourishing and all of those things. The Dalai Lama has written about the wisdom of forgiveness. The Dalai Lama has always written about important topics that are real spiritual qualities and strengths like compassion and forgiveness and gratitude as well, for that matter. So a lot of stuff has been written, a lot of ink has been spilled, you might say, about the nature of forgiveness. And so I'm going to try to, extract from this work a few kernels that I think are very important that we can put into practice when it comes to trying to make some sense out of this concept. Now, forgiveness has a dual nature. So let me just mention that at the outset. And these sorts of books and the research illustrates that as well. So on the one hand, you can think of forgiveness as a very ethereal or spiritual quality. It's otherworldly. It's transcendent, right? To forgive is divine. Have you heard that phrase before? To forgive is divine. Forgiveness is something that God does. Okay. We're not so good at it, but God, because God is perfect in power, he can pull this off. And sometimes we have a lot of trouble with it. But at the same time, forgiveness is very commonplace. It's very transactional or relational. It's worldly, common material, just as a contrast between these two ways of being. So to forgive is human. In fact, I think one of the books on the previous slide had that as a title. To forgive is human. How can something be both transcendent and spiritual and common and material and worldly at the same time? Well, we know that relationships sometimes don't go the way we want them to, do they? That in fact, in any long-term relationship, whether it's between husbands and wives, parents and their children, teachers and their students, co-workers, bosses and co-workers, coaches and players, right? Things don't always go smoothly, right? There's inevitable breakdown. And why is that? Well, it's because life is messy and people are broken and people have faults. So there's going to be inevitable misunderstandings. There's going to be conflicts. There's going to be hurts. There's going to be, grievances. And just think about how would these relationships last? How would these, how is it possible to be married to someone 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years? There's going to be inevitable issues that come up. And without the capacity for forgiveness, how would you mend that relationship? They would just fall apart. They would just unravel, right? Forgiveness, much like gratitude, as I mentioned before, the flip side of gratitude is another important strength that keeps relationships, running on full. It keeps them from unraveling. It keeps them from sputtering and conking out. So we need to understand relationships and forgiveness as a glue that holds them together, because they're all frayed at some level just because the nature of human beings. So forgiveness offers an alternative to ending the relationship, to termination. As we'll see, when it comes to our mental health and our physical health, absolutely critical that forgiveness is a key to health and to wholeness and to wellness and to fullness. And there's a lot of good research on the links between forgiving or the inability to forgive, what would be known as unforgiveness, and how that affects us under our skin, what's going on at a physiological and a biological level. So that's fascinating. As well as the science has moved forward, we've learned a lot about not just how to forgive, but why we should from a purely psychological and physiological level, quite apart from the spiritual side, which says, gratitude, that forgiveness. So you're talking about gratitude, that'll come out. Well, every time I say gratitude today, I really mean forgiveness. So just do that search and replace in your mind and we'll all be good. Forgiveness is spiritual. It's a nice idea. Isn't it nice, right? It seems like a good idea. We certainly would love to be forgiven. Who doesn't like to feel forgiven? Have their guilt and have their shame washed away, covered, replaced and erased and so forth, and their wrongdoing expunged. Feels great, doesn't it? And granting forgiveness to someone can replace resentment and bitterness and grudge holding that we have toward them. So it seems like it's a good idea. We love to do it, but it's not always that easy and certainly not that natural just because of the way we're wired. But some psychologists actually say we're wired to forgive. So that's a good thing. Okay. From a spiritual perspective, once again, just another scripture here, and then we'll look at a story. The nature and character of God is a forgiving God. So again, it's a theme that is saturated throughout the Bible, permeates scripture, whether we're talking about the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. He will not always accuse, nor will he harbor his anger forever. He does not treat us as our sins deserve or repay us according. Isn't that good news that he doesn't? For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. That's pretty far. Right? And then from Psalm 130, verses 3 and 4, if you, Lord, kept a record of sins, Lord, who could stand? We'd be in big trouble, this is what this is saying, right? Because everyone has sinned and fallen short. But with you, there is forgiveness. So that's good news, right? Now, one of my favorite stories, parables in the Bible is the parable of the prodigal son. I think for a couple of reasons. First, because it's about two sons and their dad, and I have two sons, and one of my sons has more prodigal tendencies than the other one. But it's just a wonderful story of, compassion and kindness and forgiveness and mercy. And whether you are familiar with this story or not, whether you grew up in the church or not, virtually everyone knows at some degree, at some level, the parable of the prodigal son, right? So remember, this man has two sons, and one of the sons, the younger one, has decided he's had enough. He wants his inheritance now from his dad. Now, back in the day, you didn't get your inheritance until dad had died, right? So basically what his son is saying is that you're dead to me now. I want my inheritance, give it to me. So the father gives it to him. I'm not going to read the entire, it's a very long passage. And again, I think most of you are familiar with it. But what he does, he goes out, leaves home, takes a journey to a far country, and then he squanders all of his inheritance. He wastes it all on his, reckless living, spends it on women and wine and just, he spends everything. And then there's a severe famine in the country, and he has to go and become a hired hand and work and feed the pigs in the pigsty. And then there's no food for him. So he winds up, eating the food, sharing the food with the pigs and so forth. Well, at some point he decides to come home. He's got nothing left. So what's he going to do? He's going to return sheepishly, put his tail between his legs and come back. And he's going to apologize to the father, right? He's on the way back. He's rehearsing the speech he's going to give, saying, Father, please show mercy. I'm sorry. I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Just treat me like one of your servants, right? Well, of course, the father is waiting for him to come back, right? And sees him from a distance. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. He said, "This son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and found. Now is found." Now, what I always find remarkable about this is that, as opposed to humans, how I deal with my sons, or how we often treat our children or those who have sinned against us, we require some sort of repentance, right? Apology, restitution. And he never says, son, go to your room and think about this for a while, right? All right, I am sorry, 100 times in your journal, right? And now think about all the mistakes that you made, right? He doesn't give him extra chores to do. He doesn't, make him feel bad for the choices that he made, but he celebrates his return, right? He gives him grace, he gives him forgiveness, right? He rewards him, right? The very opposite of what he deserves, because he knows the boy is already aware of his guilt and his shame, and he knows what needs to be done. He needs to be forgiven. This is the painting, the Rembrandt famous painting. I don't know if you've seen this before or ever, or versions of it. Very powerful illustration where the father, the big hands, he's putting him on the back of the son. The son is obviously feeling ashamed, and the compassion, it just oozes with compassion, this particular painting.
Dr. Emmons.
Yes.
Can you go back to the painting?
Yes,
I
Giovanna.
wanted to share something that Lucky and Giovanna pointed out to us in one of the classes, is that if you take a look at the father's hands,
Yes.
one of the hands is very masculine and the other hand is very feminine, depicting both the feminine and the masculine side of God.
Beautiful. That's true. That's so, yes, exactly right. Both sides. And so both, attributes the nature of God. So I hope you haven't heard this too many times in your classes. So I was going to ask whether to share this or not, but I just think we can never hear this too often, I think, is my sense. So thank you for that, pointing that out.
Can never be too much or too many. We forget tomorrow.
We do.
We walk away from here today. It doesn't matter how many times we've heard all this. And guess what? We forget. I mean, that's the truth. So we need continuously, last time you spoke about neuroplasticity, we need to continuously
Yes.
in our brain.
You showed us the bicycle clip, right?
Yeah.
You showed us
Yes.
the bicycle clip. I was saying to everybody before you came in, from June 20th till now, I've forgotten to be grateful so many times.
Oh, that's right. I say that too. You know, I need to remind myself every day to be grateful. And why is that? Because every day I forget. You know?
And we all
So,
want to have a prodigal father, but we don't want to be the prodigal father.
yes, that's right. That's right. Thank you for that. Here's another example, this time from literature. Okay. One of the most enduring works of the last couple of years, Les Miserables, right? Victor Hugo's amazing novel. And every decade or so, there's like a fresh screen adaptation, film adaptation, or staging of the classical musical. I actually saw this in Broadway in New York City like 20 years ago. Actually, it was the year 2000, and that was very powerful. But it was not as powerful as this version, I think. Anyway, you may have your favorite, but the 1998 version starring Liam Neeson, right, as Jean Valjean, and Jeffrey Rush as Javert, Uma Thurman, and so forth, played. Colette was the daughter, right? What was Uma Thurman's character? Can't remember. Anyway, you know the story, I think, that out on parole after 19 years in a French prison, Jean Valjean, he tries to find shelter, right? And nobody will accept him. He's turned away from everywhere he goes because he's a convict, and everyone knows that he has to show his papers and on his passport, right? He's finally taken in by a kindly bishop, Bishop Bienvenu, and gives him food, gives him shelter for the night. And how does he repay his host? He steals from him. He steals all of the silverware, right, in the middle of the night, and takes off. And the next morning, the police catch up with Valjean and bring him back to the bishop. And instead of saying, yes, you've caught him, here's the thief, so on, Valjean actually claimed that the bishop gave him the silverware as a gift. And the bishop confirms this. He said, yes, he did, right? It was just a shock. The first time I saw this, it's like, whoa, you expect him, to say, thank God you've caught the thief, right? He needs to go back to jail. But instead, and then he not only says, yes, I gave him the silverware, he not only gives him mercy, but also he gives them another gift. He gives them grace, right? He says, you didn't take the candlesticks. Why don't you take these? They're worth, a large sum of money as well. And they let him go. They uncuff him, and so forth. And Jean Valjean, Liam Neeson, he's totally confounded, right? He doesn't know what to make of this, right? Because his identity up to that point was that of a thief, a prisoner, just a number. That was his identity. He was a sinner, but now he's been shown mercy, right? He's a human being with value, and he's been treated in a very compassionate, loving, gracious, forgiving way by this bishop. And so, and there's a scene, a very powerful scene. Let me see if I can show that to you. I have a little video clip here, if this works. And try that. I'm gonna go to this right here. I think I've enabled sound. Let me know if you can hear or see this. Oh, I'm sorry. Now it's going to show me an ad. No, we don't want to see the ad. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. I share this in my classes when I talk about forgiveness, because many students have not seen this movie. And so it's really very powerful.
You're not sharing your screen yet.
Oh, thank you. Let's try that one more time. And if it doesn't work, I'll just,
You can
okay.
send me the link and I can play it for you if it doesn't work.
Share computer sound. I gotta go to new share, right?
Mhm.
Let's try that. How about now?
Yes.
So we'll use wooden spoons. I don't want to hear anything more about it.
I'm sorry to disturb you,
You caught him.
but I had my eye on this man. And
Thank God. I'm very angry with you, Jean Valjean.
what happened to your eye, Monseigneur?
Didn't he tell you he was our guest last night?
Oh, yes. After we searched his knapsack and found all this silver, he claimed that you gave it to him.
Yes. Of course I gave him the silverware. But why didn't you take the candlesticks? That was very foolish. Madame Gillot, fetch the silver candlesticks. They're worth at least 2,000 francs. Why did you leave them? Hurry. Monsieur Valjean has to get going. He's lost a lot of time. Did you forget to take them?
Are you saying he told us the truth?
Of course. Thank you for bringing him back. I'm very relieved.
Release him.
You're really letting me go?
Didn't you understand the bishop?
Madame Gillot, offer these men some wine. They must be thirsty.
Thank you.
And don't forget. Don't ever forget. You've promised to become a new man.
Promise? Why are you doing this?
Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil. With this silver, I bought your soul. I've ransomed you from fear and hatred. And now I give you back to God.
Such a powerful scene. When he pulls the hood down, you know, it's very dramatic. So I love that. And it's a really wonderful illustration. So we see examples all over the place, right? When it comes to forgiveness. Okay, now I'm not sure if I need to do another share. Giovanna, can you see the slide?
You know, Robert, can I say something?
Please do.
I don't know how to be like that, and I'd like.
No.
So will you teach us how to be like?
I'll try.
Because I can't do that. I'd like to do that for the rest of my life. What's left? So.
Someone needs to teach us, I think. I'll do my best. Okay, we'll learn together. Okay, are we back with the slideshow?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I'll figure this out. I've been doing Zoom since March, and you think I'd have it down by now. Anyway, but that obviously that is a superhuman act, I think, that requires intervention from above to be able to be that forgiving and that compassionate. That really, I mean, grace is like that. That's why they say grace is radical. Like grace is reckless. You know, and it's just so. He was dumbfounded. Jean Valjean, and no one ever treated him like that. You're so used to getting what you deserve, right? He stole bread. He got, 20 years of hard labor. He can only imagine what he thought he was going to get by stealing the silverware, probably, the rest of his life locked up. And here is someone who just turns everything upside down, inside out. Instead of giving him, what he deserves, more punishment, he gets, not only gets mercy, but he gets grace on top of that. He gets something he's not earned or deserved, which is, freedom. And that totally, of course, changed his life. You're familiar with the story. It just set him on a new path, a new trajectory. Not unusual, I think, for a case of forgiveness, that forgiveness can be and often is transformational. Okay, well, here's where we actually define now, half hour in, what forgiveness is. And I like to, when I talk to my class about this, and again, these are, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds and 22-year-olds, and super smart and super motivated and super interested in spiritual principles and realities like forgiveness. But for some reason, sometimes we have information which is inconsistent with the best way to think about something like forgiveness, which can actually get in our way as we try to forgive others or feel forgiven by others or by God. So I like to say, first of all, what forgiveness is not. And there's a long list of things which it is not, and this is just a short list of those. First, it's not forgetting. People will say, just forgive and forget. All right, especially those who actually done something wrong to someone else. They say, why can't you forget that? Just forgive me. Let's just move forward. Let's just wipe it out, erase the past. And it's very difficult to forget, just because of the way our minds are, apart from some sort of strong intervention, we're not going to forget what has happened to us. It's not forgetting. It's not, just ignoring it as well. So we might be able to move forward, but doesn't mean we actually forget, because we have to remember the fact that we have been harmed, that there is a hurt, there is a grievance, because without acknowledging that, there's nothing to forgive. Right? You wouldn't have forgiveness unless there was first some sort of crime that the bishop is not going to forgive Jean Valjean unless he first did something wrong, which obviously he did. So it's also not condoning or excusing the action, denying it, overlooking it, right? These are all kind of related responses. So it's not that, it's not saying, okay, well, it's okay, I don't mind that this happened or you did that. It's not providing an excuse or pretending it didn't happen. Yeah, it's not just moving on as well, So again, it does require dealing, and this will come up later when we go through some of the steps of forgiveness that have been advocated by forgiveness experts. You have to go through this process, and it is a process, and you have to go step by step. There's no quick way around it, no shortcut. Turn on a forgiveness switch and then it happens. But it's a process at both a decisional level as well as an emotional level. Okay, it's certainly not opposed to justice. When a person has done something, you want to see consequence, right? There's justice, sometimes punishment is necessary. And so it's not necessarily opposed to that as well. I'm going to show you at the end today a really powerful illustration of someone who commits a very, very bad crime, but then is forgiven. And when she explains why she is forgiving this individual, she's saying, I still want to see justice happen. It's not opposed to that. Okay. And then fourth, it's not always about reconciling. This is a very important one, because there are cases where it's not good, it's not wise to reconcile with someone who might, harm you again in the future. And many times those people that we want to forgive, that we feel we need to forgive, have done things to us, and for various reasons we can't reconcile with them. We're talking about some sort of, like restoration of the relationship, where maybe the person is gone, right? Maybe they've passed away. Maybe, that we have no access to them any longer. So we might not be able to have this reconciliation. So these are all things which forgiveness is not. And it's probably a longer list, but list should never be more than 3 or 4 items, because it's very hard to remember them all. Now let's talk about what forgiveness is. Now, again, I realize this is kind of, I'm taking a condensed summary of what most thought is about the nature of forgiveness. You may have a slightly different take on it, and that's fine. We certainly don't speak with one voice when it comes to a concept as deep and rich as forgiveness. And it is a very deep and rich concept. It's hard to rush through it. It's hard to be comprehensive. So I say all that just as a caveat as we go through this. You might be thinking, well, what about this case, or is that part of forgiveness or not? And those are really, really good questions. And it'd be great to have a discussion about those toward the end during the question and answer period. So I like to think about forgiveness, and many images you see often, if you like Google like forgiveness images, you'll see like a release or letting go. You see chains being broken. You'll see people breaking out of a confined space. You'll see people sending stuff up into the sky, balloons, or here's a paper airplane. It's like letting go. And that's the feeling when you are forgiving someone, or when you are being forgiven by someone, you feel this release, being let go of things at different levels. So I mentioned before that forgiveness is turning down. It's the diminishment of the negative or unpleasant things, much like gratitude is the amplification of those pleasant things. So we're letting go of negative thoughts. We're letting go of negative feelings. So negative thoughts toward the person that may have done something to us, harmed us in some way, whether intentional or not. Letting go of negative feelings, feelings of anger, feelings of resentment, feeling of wanting to get back at them, retaliation, which again can be very commonplace when we've been hurt by others. And then letting go of negative behaviors, the thought to harm the person, the thought to speak ill of them, right, as a way of dealing with our own pain. And it also may involve the restoration of positive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as well, such as compassion, okay, mercy, and then the reconciliation, which may or may not occur. So that's a really good way, I think, to think about forgiveness. Now, let me read actual definition of forgiveness. This comes from Dr. Robert Enright. Dr. Robert Enright has spent over 3 decades studying forgiveness. So he has spent actually 10 years more on forgiveness than I spent on gratitude. So I think he knows more about forgiveness than virtually anyone, certainly in the academic world. But he's also a counselor, so he's put these ideas into practice, and he's developed a very empirically tested and validated system for developing and learning forgiveness. Listen to this. Forgiveness is a process. It involves allowing yourself to feel the negative emotions you justly have towards an offense and really putting the wrong into words in a congruent and authentic, truthful way. Then choosing to release it, either giving it to a higher power or letting it go to a cosmic sense of justice or earthly legal justice system, and then continuing the process until negative feelings are replaced with peace, empathy, and compassion. Isn't that good? When someone forgives, they no longer have a portion of their daily life consumed in negative feelings toward the person or the situation. Person then may include compassion, to act compassionately, generously, to which the wrongdoer, by nature of the harmful act or acts, has no right. Okay, I think that pretty much encapsulates it. Now, it's also not lost on people who study forgiveness, whether from a practical, academic, or from a theological vantage point, to think about when you forgive someone, you're basically giving them a gift. Just like when you've been forgiven. Think about a time where you've been forgiven for something that you did to someone. You've been released from that burden. You feel like you've received a gift that you're not entitled to or deserve, but yet you've been given this gift anyway, as Jean Valjean was. And so when we forgive someone, that means we're not going to count the wrongful act against them. We're going to erase the slate, right? We're going to start over. We might not forget, again, because it's not always easily or natural to do so. But we identify the fact that there was some sort of hurt or grievance that we have that's legitimate, but then we decide we're not going to count that against them, okay? That's the naming the wrongdoing and then giving them the gift of not counting against them. So we can think about forgiveness that way. To forgive is actually to give. And what are we giving? We are giving a gift. Okay, so in the material that was sent out, publicity for today and for this session on forgiveness, there was a quote from C.S. Lewis, the great Christian apologist. Well, I'll share that with you again shortly. Here's a good question to think about, though. Is forgiveness easy? I know it doesn't come easy for me. I suspect it's not easy for a lot of people. I mean, if it was, there wouldn't be mountains and mountains of research on it. It wouldn't be in the scripture, saturated throughout the scripture so much, if this came naturally or easy. Here's a quote. I think this was by I think it was a social scientist who said that to forgive is one of the hardest things in the world to do, and it's one of the greatest of human achievements. Powerful, once again. Okay, listen, one survey reported 83% people reported they would need God's help in order to forgive. 83%, like more than 8 out of 10. I can't do it by myself. God, I need your help to be able to forgive this individual. 15% indicated they could forgive someone on their own. Only 15%, 1 out of 7 about said that I could do it on my own. I don't need, supernatural help in doing so. I guess the other 2%, that comes out to 98%. Maybe the other 2% says, I don't forgive. I'd rather not forgive, not sure. There's the quote. Everyone says forgiveness is a lovely idea until they have something to forgive. Isn't that true? Yeah, that's a great idea. Should be more forgiveness in the world, for sure. I should be forgiven when I've done something wrong. But then when the rubber hits the road, right, forgiveness on the ground, when the positional becomes practical, not always such an easy thing to actually pull off. People were asked, this was another big survey. I'm going to talk for about 3 or 4 more minutes, and then we'll move into transition to the next part of this morning. This is a Gallup poll, and Gallup, is a pretty legitimate, reputable polling organization, probably the best one. Which do you usually do when you feel that someone has deliberately done something wrong to you? People are asked. Okay, this is a broad sample across the population in the United States. Almost half said they try to forgive. Doesn't mean they're successful at it, but they do try to forgive. About the same amount, 45% said, I try to overlook it. I try not to notice it, right, or think about it, or, attribute bad motivation to the person who's done this sort of thing. Only 14% said they hold on to the resentment. I like that feeling of being in control in the situation. I want to feel, a sense of resentment. Maybe that'll justify my behavior toward this person, or maybe toward others. 8% admitted trying to get even, which, is probably not the socially desirable response to give in these surveys. So the last two may be actually a little bit higher if people were super honest, and they're not always in these polls. So still, it seems like, 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 are having difficulty. And again, those who are saying they're trying to forgive, not necessarily successful at doing so. And then in another survey, people were asked about very serious offenses, because not obviously everything that happens to you is equally damaging or equally forgivable. So some things are easier to forgive. These people are actually asked in this survey, would you forgive someone who did these things? And there's percentage. The first column is those who said they could forgive if someone, for example, told lies about you, spread untruths about you. 3 out of 4 said, yes, I could forgive that. If someone stole money from you, 2 out of 3 said yes. Aggressed towards you in a violent way, little bit less than 2/3. What about if you were held up with a gun? Now it's tipping the other way, the scale. Most said they could not forgive that. A murder in your community, or being a victim of a severe crime. 73 rape, a member of your family, most said they could not. Murdered your child. Amazingly to me, that 15% said they could forgive in this situation, but most could not. So forgiveness varies depending upon the nature of the offense. Obviously, there's things that are not as severe are easier to forgive than those that are more severe. It's hard to ask for forgiveness. Here's a little cartoon. Man is in a greeting card store. And can you read it says, do you have a card that stops short of saying, I'm sorry, yet vaguely hints of some wrongdoing? That's so hard to say, I'm sorry, or to admit, I made a mistake in judgment, an error in judgment, right? As opposed to saying, I messed up, right? Please forgive me. The apology, so important. We don't need to do the research to learn that apologies is an important step in being forgiven by someone. The Dalai Lama said that, and he's a person who knows a lot about living, and about compassion, and about mercy, and about forgiveness. And he's saying it's forgiveness which allows us to be happy, and also allows other people to be happy. The Dalai Lama said that the purpose to life is to be happy, to achieve long-term sustainable happiness. So he knows what it is. He's seen it. He struggled with it. I like this quote from the Dalai Lama. And we're going to look at the research in just a minute. So I'm going to skip over a little bit of this because we're about 45 minutes in. We're going to look at the research and see there's benefits to forgiveness and there are costs to unforgiveness. Let me just finish this part of it with this quote. Famous psychiatrist, secular psychiatrist, not spiritual, not doing Christian counseling. Dr. Carl Menninger is reported to have said, "If I could convince the patients in psychiatric hospitals that their sins were forgiven, 75% of them could walk out the next day." He thought it was that critical to their well-being that most of their psychological problems, whether it was depression or anxiety or more severe conditions, was due to feeling unforgiven, right? And so now, does the research actually bear this out? Does forgiveness, deliver on its promise and on its potential? And as we're going into this next phase in this transition period, here's just a few questions to think about. Maybe we can reflect on those and talk about those at the end today. Why do you think it's difficult to forgive those who hurt you? Do you think it's difficult to ask for forgiveness? So on the other end, as opposed to granting and asking for it. And then which is more difficult, to forgive others or to forgive yourself? Forgiveness of others or forgiveness of self. Okay, so, I know these two people. They look familiar. We're just getting started now. We got a lot to look at in terms of the science, the data, also the practice of forgiveness. What have we learned? What actually works? Are there some systematic things that we can actually do? But right now I want to turn it over to Lockie and Giovanna, two of my favorite people I've just gotten to know in the last few months. You guys, I'm so grateful that God has put us together. These are, it's been a real gift for me to get to share with you all and in your ministry, and two of the most compassionate, forgiving, grateful people that I know. And, I know a little bit about forgiving. I know a lot more about Thanksgiving, but I don't know as much about giving. So that's why I'm going to let you guys talk about giving. And I know we're all grateful for who they are and what they've done. So I'm going to stop my share and you guys can take it away.
Thank you so much. I think Gigi loved that picture.
That's a good picture.
Actually, she took that picture.
Well, I love the two people in that picture very, very, very much.
Well, thank you so much. I think, those questions, why is it so hard to forgive? It's not so easy, but I guess towards the end, hopefully we'll get to some of that. I know if there would have not been forgiveness between Lucky and I, we would not be here today.
Yes.
And constantly today
Constantly.
too. Giovanna needs to forgive me 70 times every day.
No, but I think the truth is, and we see.
No, but I'm not joking. I think Giovanna needs to forgive me all day long because I'm acting weird all day long, And the people who see me in the chat, they know I'm weird. So.
No, but the concept and that quote that you just with, 75% of the people could walk away the next day. Isn't that amazing?
That
one of the
amazing.
biggest things we see people struggling with is anxiety, depression, but I think also goes the other way.
The people we see every day,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
But it also goes the other way. I think not only people knowing they have been forgiven, but also people that cannot forgive an act, cannot forgive something, cannot, like the pictures you said, let it go. People that cannot let it go, we get stuck. We get stuck, and it's, I see it in the people we counsel and we meet all the time. Yeah. That's one of the biggest stumbling blocks to freedom. And of course, like you said, there's a way of processing it, like realizing it did hurt, realizing it did happen, realizing you're not excusing it. And there doesn't have to be reconciliation, but the act of just letting it go,
We have a class, I forget, sometimes somebody else helps us teaching, I think it's Anelli, right? And it's how to grieve and mourn the loss. That also helps to, there's so many steps to forgiveness. That one word then just says forgiveness. Forgive, 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 forget. There's a process to forgive, and there's different, and you showed that chart, the wonderful chart, so many levels of forgiveness for different things.
Yeah.
So, and the psychiatric thing was really, wow.
So, so as we continue here on forgiveness, Jose, are you here today? Oh, yes, Jose.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I think so.
Yeah, because sometimes my computer
Actually,
The
it's coming
sound
from,
issues. Okay, good.
off the video,
Good.
without the video, because we
This is really awesome. I'm really getting a lot out of this. Oh, no. Okay. Oh, without the video, is that better? Is that better? The sound okay? Yeah? Okay, here we go, because I've learned two things, or at least I was reminded of two things. Number one, that forgiveness is not forgetting. You know, that's, you're going to, you have a brain, you have a mind, and you're going to remember the issues. And the other thing is forgiveness takes time, and it's a process, and it takes effort, and it's not easy, it's not a switch. I love to be reminded of these things. So I think everybody knows who I am. I'm Dr. Jose Azaret. I'm a pediatrician in town, and I've known Lackey for over 15 years. You know, and I know Lackey. I know when Lackey used to have a lot of money, he used to give a lot, and used to give all his money to people that needed it. He used to give money to all kinds of ministries, and now I know him when he doesn't have that money. You know, he doesn't have a big bank account, but you know what? He's still giving what little he has. He's still giving away books. He's still giving away videos. He's still giving away when people need something, he'll find a way to give it to them. Especially he's giving of his time. You know, he's there for us 24/7. Over the years, I have come to feel like we're a family. You know, Hope for Life, it's like a family. We're here because we need to be here, because we want to be here. You know, we depend on this family. We depend on Lucky and Giovanna. We depend on Hope for Life. I kind of wonder where we would be if we didn't have Hope for Life, if we didn't have Lucky or Giovanna to reach out to and hang on to us when we need it. But you know what? They depend on us too. Almost on a weekly basis, they're there for us. Once, twice, 3 times a week, as many times as we need it. You know, this is not a church, so they're not getting any grants. They're not getting any. They're not charging for anything. They're not asking you to tithe. This is a ministry, and they depend on our donations. And this is where we need to come in. You know, this is wonderful to get together and to talk and to share and to be healed and to have other people hear our issues and hear our what we're going through and just be there for us and listen to us. So I'm asking you to continue to support this ministry with your donations. You know, one of the easiest way to do it is to do it in a recurrent way. If you can put up that screen, you know, sometimes we go on vacation. Sometimes we're not always there. Every time there's an activity going on. Or sometimes Lucky and Giovanna need a break and they're not there. And you know, when that happens, they don't get a donation. You know, all of a sudden that week there's nothing. So I urge you to maybe go on one of these sites and put this on a recurrent giving, so that we would continue to support this ministry. again, I ask you guys, where would you be if you didn't have this ministry? What would you be doing? What would your life be like if you didn't have them? I know my life would be very different, and that's all I had to say. You know, I thank you everybody who's here, being here, and I beg of you to ask your friends and ask your family to come and listen to these because they're life changing. And thank you, Giovanna, and thank you, Lucky, for having some of these wonderful speakers that you bring to us.
All right, and thank you, Jose, for that message. It is amazing what's going on here today, isn't it? We have we are partaking on amazing things, on amazing speakers. Today is no exception, you know. And although we are all here, and you see all the different ways of paying, of being generous, of sharing your generosity, and what I'm hearing today, as we talk about this, is letting go. You know, 3 out of the 4 points that I saw this morning that defines forgiving, is letting go. And that has been an intrinsic part of my walk with Christ here today. Continues after 8 years. And I also have to let go of some of the things that I have brought over to this ministry that are kind of dysfunctional, you know. One of the most dysfunctional things that I've had is the lack of gratitude. You know, I've always expected more for myself, and I always thought that I was the one that needed to have all the things, but nobody else. You know, I was fine with things. I was so missing gratitude in my life that when I saw things that worked for me, I wouldn't share them with anybody because this cannot work for anybody else but for me, because I'm going to be better than anybody else. Well, you know what? That's poisoning as much as lack of forgiveness. And today I just want to cross that that little path that most of us do not want to cross. And it's we have hearts full of gratitude. We just don't know sometimes how to tap into them. So today I ask you to set aside all these second thoughts, because we want to give, we want to share, you know, we want to be generous with the things that we receive, and somehow our minds get in the way of it. We see somebody in the street that is asking for money and we want to give, but then we think, nope, because such and such is going to do such and such with that money. Well, transport over to this. We're not homeless here, by all means, you know, but bills happen. We have to make this whole ministry run. We are all part of this ministry, not just in attendance, but also in the things that we do. There's some things that need to be done. There's some things that need to be taken care of. So let's all tap into this generosity and share, not just what we hear here in our actions when we're living our daily lives, but also in the gratitude that we have for what we get out of this. So give with your heart. Don't let your mind get in the way of that attitude that you have to give, and to give generously. Text by Kindred is the easiest way. You just open up your text app, and as if you were dialing a number, you dial 45777. You write the dollar amount on the message that you want to send, with a space and the word hope. If you've done it before, that's all you have to do. If you've never done it, there will be a link that will come back to you. Follow the instructions on that link, and you can actually get into a recurrent giving pattern, which, you know, it always helps. We tend to forget sometimes. PayPal, Cash App also, and if you want to use snail mail, there is your address on the screen. It's 11715 Southwest 87th Avenue, Miami, 33176. We thank you, Lucky and Giovanna, Dr. Emmons. Amazing stuff that I'm listening today. I can't wait to hear the second part. We'll give it back to you.
Jose, Dr. Jose Azarat and Giorgio Ciabancini. Thank you so much. That was, is that wrong?
Yeah. Cerboncini.
Oh, sorry, I don't speak Italian, I speak Chinese.
That was perfect. That was, like, wow.
But thank you guys so much. And even Dr. Emmons, your words about us were so kind.
Well, I mean that deeply. I haven't known you guys very long, but I just feel this, especially after my first class, and I'm sure the same thing will happen today. I went home and told my wife I just felt a strong sense of connection with you both and everyone who is you're ministering to, and it's been just a gift for me. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. And before we continue, I just want to wrap up with a few little announcements. First of all, next week we have, I don't know, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Good. We have another wonderful speaker that will be sharing with us part of his wisdom. His name is Dr. Mark Gordon Fee. I have a little video to show you of him, but I don't know if Lucky, if there's anything you want to say about him.
Actually, I spoke to Clay, and Clay said, and I wanted to share this with some of the people, Dr. Mark's father is one of the most famous Greek Bible scholars in the world today. So we're going to have Mark's sister in March. She's also a theologian. Mark is also a theologian, but their dad, so they have good, come from very good biblical genes, is one of the foremost Greek scholars today, Greek Bible scholars in the world today. That's what I wanted to share.
And he's very good of Clay McLean.
And he's a very, very good friend of Clay McLean's.
Wow.
So, Clay, Gigi.
Hello, Hope for Life, Miami. My name is Mark Fee, and I'm so excited to join you Saturday, September 19th at 9 a.m. via Zoom, where I want to take a little bit of time to unpack these words of Paul when he said, "We all with unveiled faces behold the Lord's glory as in a mirror, are being transformed into his likeness, into his image, with ever increasing glory." I want to take time to talk about what does that mean to be transformed into that image. I love the fact that Hope for Life is about restoring the image of love, ideally the image of God, the image of Jesus. So I want to take some time to just unpack that a little bit, explore that maybe a little bit more deeply with you. I so look forward to doing that together. Hope to see you soon.
Oh, that's really exciting. Lucky and Giovanna, you are so gifted in networking with God. So thank you for making this possible.
We're very excited, and it's such a sweet, kind man. I've never met him, but such a sweet, kind man, So again, I think God is doing the networking for us,
I think God is doing all this networking. I was thinking about it the other day. Just the last 6 months, speaker after speaker after speaker, has been like, I don't know. I was just thinking.
So anyhow,
But Gigi has more announcements.
Do you have, what else, Gigi?
Yes, so I see there's a lot of new faces here today. We're so glad that you're joining us. Perhaps you're here because Dr. Emmons, you're a fan of Dr. Emmons, and you said, let me check this out. But we want to welcome you and also invite you to join us any Saturday. You're very, very welcome to be with us. Just to give you a snippet of what we do at Hope for Life, we are a deep inner heart healing ministry. Like we said before, we're not a church, so a lot of the people that attend, they go to different churches, and what we do is we talk about deep inner heart healing. So what has been happening in the last 6 months is very different to our regular classes, which we are about to begin again. We have a cycle. We really don't know how long the cycle is. It keeps changing, and it's okay. But in the cycle, we talk about different types of behavioral and behavioral addictions mostly, but also any other type of addictions. We go into pain that comes from our family of origin. We call it FOOP, family of origin pain. We talk about what does a normal dysfunctional family look like. The different roles in the family, if you're a firstborn, a secondborn, or if you are an only child, and what maturity looks like according to scriptures, according to what science, what happens to us when we don't receive what we're supposed to receive when we're young, and how we carry those wounds and those empty spaces into our relationships. There's so much that we cover at Hope for Life. We talk about forgiveness. We actually have about 3 or 4 classes on forgiveness and grief and mourning. Healthy sexuality is another topic. I think we have about 4 or 5 weeks of that too. That's just a little bit of, in a nutshell, of what we talk about. So as we're speaking about this now, I want to let everyone know we are talking with Lucky and Giovanna about what are the next steps. It's hard to be 100% sure of when to reopen, but we're following guidelines. We're waiting to see what happens, but we are already talking about how that transition is going to look like. And starting in October, we are going to start our cycle of classes, and Lucky, of course, will continue bringing wonderful speakers. But we are going to get ready to start our classes again. So if you are here for the first time, we welcome you, and we would love for you to join us. You can visit our website, hopeforlifemiami.org. There's plenty of information in there that you can see what are the next classes coming up, and you can just be up to date. Last but not least, I wanted to share this little thing that I made for Dr. Emmons, preparing for today. Let me see if I can show this here. Sorry. So here, it's amazing. You were talking so much about letting go, and to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you. So I wanted to thank you, Dr. Emmons, because this is a topic that we all need, because in a nutshell, we need to be free.
Yes.
And so today you are a big part of our healing, and we will never take this for granted. So Dr. Emmons, please take it away. We're so excited that you're here with us.
Thank you, Gigi. Dr. Smedes is someone that we can all learn a lot from. His writings and his lifetime spent on forgiveness, very, very powerful. And well, I was going to ask too, Gigi, are these sessions recorded?
Yes, we record them and we put them up on our YouTube.
Okay, because I'd love to be able to hear Dr. Fee talk next week, but I would not love to get up at 6 o'clock to do so, my time. So I know it's much more spiritual to get up early in the morning than later. You know, isn't it true that God is much more likely to hear our prayers if we pray at 5 a.m. than at 11 a.m.? I heard that once.
Every time I heard that, I wanted to crawl back into my bed and die.
We have to wake up early in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh, that woke us all up.
Gary, you're unmuted. Are you wanting to say something?
Oh, I didn't even know that. No, nothing. No, sorry about that.
It's okay.
All right, shall we continue?
Yes, Anna, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I'm
unmute yourself.
reflecting on the question that we with, so we can start with that reflection.
Yes.
Is it difficult to forgive, right? And I would like to say that for most of the people, if we use our brain, the front part and the back part of the brain, if we think about it and we get all the logic behind scientifically and religiously, we can make a decision to forgive with our front part of the brain, right? The logical. But with our feelings, right? If we try to hold hands with that person that hurt us, or if we try to hack that person, our body has some kind of refusal, which is the back part of the brain. It's like a refuse to forgive, even though we have made the decision to forgive. It's like kind of natural shaking, natural like against forgiveness. So I want to ask, Doctor, if when people forgive, it's very important what you say about people forgiving themselves, because
Yes.
I know the scientific results. When we forgive somebody and they forgive themselves, because that's a very important related thing, because we might forgive, but the person might be still not forgiving themselves. How much reincidence? Because the main reason we don't forgive is because we're afraid to get hurt again. So how many of those that are forgiven repeat the same thing versus the ones who are forgiving and take it like a gift, like you were saying, and don't do it again? Because when we forgive, we're afraid that they do it again. Maybe there is some statistic that says people that have been forgiven, 70% never do it again, or maybe like they do it the same. Like, I would like to hear something about that.
Yes, but so many rich morsels within your comments. Thank you very much. You actually did anticipate, that's almost a beautiful lead-in, not almost, it actually is a beautiful lead-in to one of the distinctions that I want to make. As we learn more about forgiveness, we know there's more nuances. The research from just the scientific angle tended to treat forgiveness more as a generic process. It's kind of monolithic, one thing. You either forgive or you don't forgive. You either forgive others, and it means one thing, or you forgive yourself, or you feel forgiven by God. It just means one thing. But we know that there's at least two different sides to forgiveness. And you mentioned this. You brought that out in your distinction, because you talked about the decisional forgiveness, excuse me, which is much more of a conscious choice. It involves our thoughts. So we talk about this as the cognitive, meaning thoughts side of forgiveness. So we decide, I'm going to forgive this person. I make a decision, right? A decision to forgive is a decision to act differently toward this offender, not to retaliate, not to seek payback, or not even to ask for an apology or a restitution. And that's a decision, and that can be a struggle for sure. But it can be like turning on a switch, right? Turning on a light. Once it's made, it's made. And for many people, that's the easier part of it. The harder part of it, which I think you were alluding to, is the emotional aspect to it, the emotional side of forgiveness. Much more of a gradual process involving a change in feelings toward this person, a change in motivation toward this person. So we want to replace unforgiving emotions like resentment, like bitterness, maybe anger toward this person, with positive feelings of compassion and empathy and kindness toward this person. So this is much more of I think a gradual process that cannot be rushed, even though the decisional is more of a kind of right now, kind of one point in time, a one-off event, where this is much more gradual process involving a shift, right? That and one might continue to change in their feelings over time and generate more positive emotions until at some point, so what's happening, you're dialing down the negative and turning up the volume on the positive, but this can't happen quickly. And usually it's not a good idea to happen quickly as well. Sometimes those who forgive very, very quickly, you almost are suspicious, right? It's like they haven't really processed the hurt at a deep level, though we don't often know what's in another person's mind and heart. But I think that happens a lot, certainly for me. And when I know I need to be forgiven by someone like my wife, I can certainly identify with that. And if she forgives too fast, and she doesn't, because she really works through this and she needs to, believe me, being married to me, it's much more of a deep, gradual process. And I think that does take some time, take some work as well. And we know there are certain steps that are more effective than others. I'm going to share that with you all in just a few minutes. So that's a great question, and there's many sides to that, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that. Well, I do want to get through a little bit more just to show you the science, what we've learned, and also some of the steps toward forgiveness, which are also, and just again, just to finish this thought about the two aspects of forgiveness. It's been shown in the research that decisional forgiveness does in fact reduce anger toward one's, the person that you have to forgive, what you call the offender or perpetrator or whatever. So toward this person, you do feel less anger toward them when you make that decision, but you don't necessarily feel better emotions or less stress, okay? The emotional health is only brought about by the emotional forgiveness. So emotional forgiveness leads to a decrease in perceived stress and also an improvement in emotional health. But so basically the emotional forgiveness is more powerful and more sustainable in terms of its effects than the decisional form. But both aspects are important, and both two important steps one has to go through. Okay, check this out. I mentioned before that there's just an avalanche of information about forgiveness. This is an infographic that I just, fortunately, it was like this divine conspiracy just showed up in my email box yesterday morning, so I wanted to include that. Some of the benefits of forgiveness. There's a lot of stuff on here. I won't walk through all of it with you, but we've already mentioned some of this stuff. That in the upper right-hand corner, you see the couple up there, the silhouettes, right? Forgiveness is necessary for any long-term successful relationships. How do we overcome, grudges and bad things happen when we're hurt by our partner or we hurt our partner? How do we maintain, sustain that relationship over time? Forgiveness offers an alternative to relationship dissolution or termination. But look at this, this dove over here on the left-hand side, in terms of a broader societal level, right? What we're going through, what Giovanna and Lockie mentioned at the very beginning, our society is polarized, right? Is forgiveness an important step toward more civil discourse? It seemed like it would have to be, right? It doesn't mean it would be the answer for everything, but without forgiveness, it's hard to see how sides could come together and find some common ground. We know the research shows that people are more likely to forgive those in their own tribe or their own group, culture, ethnicity, and so on. We're less likely to forgive the outsider. But if we can become more forgiving, if we can engage in activities and steps and programs and classes, whatever it's necessary, whatever it takes, right? We can perhaps create a more forgiving and understanding culture, and certainly greater civility, something that is in very short supply. So whether we look at it from a standpoint of relationships or society or just for ourselves, right? Forgiveness is important for the self. It's not just a good thing to do or a nice thing to do or a spiritual thing to do, but in terms of bringing us emotional peace and contentment and reducing our anger and hostility. And physical benefits, we're going to talk about those very shortly, also accrue when a person replaces unforgiving thoughts and unforgiving feelings with forgiving thoughts and forgiven feelings. And then there are some science-tested ways to forgive. There are a couple of models, one of which I'll talk about, Everett Worthington's REACH model. So REACH is just an acronym that each stands for an important term here, and we'll unpack that in just a little bit. There's also another one by Enright. So if you want to go deeper, through the experts that I would consult, one is Worthington. Just Google Worthington forgiveness. You'll get all kinds of really good information, videos and books, and research the actual articles if you want to go deeper at a scientific level. Or Robert Enright, between the two of them, they have 6 decades of experience in understanding what forgiveness is, how it works, what are the obstacles to it, and more importantly, how to do it. Okay, so let's see, right there. Let's talk about the opposite of forgiveness, which of course would be unforgiveness. If a person doesn't forgive, by definition, they are unforgiving, right? Unforgiving responses have costs associated with them. You may have heard that old Chinese proverb, I think, fortune cookie, wisdom, that said that if you pursue revenge, you should dig 2 graves, right? One for you and one for the person that you are trying to get revenge on. And it certainly is costly. Studies have shown that unforgiveness affects blood pressure and the immune system and chronic pain and illness and relationships. So forgiveness reduces blood pressure. It impacts our immune system. There's studies showing that it affects cellular immunity as well as humoral immunity and our white blood cells and our antibody response, reduction in chronic pain, improvement in relationships, and a reduction in anxiety and depression. I suspect that Gigi covers this material in her classes on forgiveness. It sounds like you get into this in some degree of detail. So we should care about forgiveness for a number of reasons. Number one, just because it's a more satisfying way of life, of course. It's not just a nice thing to do, though, or because, you know, God will be pleased with us if we forgive, but rather because it's reflected in our own health. So just out of self-interest, forgiveness is a good thing. It's something we do for ourselves because it's reflected in our bodies and in our brains. So unforgiveness is reflected. So cortisol is the stress hormone. You know, the fight or flight reaction, when you're dealing with a stressor, when you have to take action to deal with a threat, our brain tells us something scary is happening to us, like we've been, you know, hurt by someone else. That's one kind of threat. Our bodies pump out more stress hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline or epinephrine and norepinephrine, the fight or flight reaction, but also cortisol, which reflects activity in other parts of our endocrine system, which we know can actually impact our health in a lot of ways. Cortisol as a hormone, very important for energy processing in our body. It's one of the building blocks that our body uses to take action, to mobilize energy to deal with stressors. But in the long term, when we're continually pumping out cortisol, because we're treating every situation as a stressor, we're treating every relationship as a grievance, right? We see enemies everywhere. That impacts our bodies over the long term, partly and largely because of the impact on cortisol. Cytokine balance. Cytokines are the chemicals that our immune system uses to communicate with each other. And if that balance is shifted in a detrimental way, that can compromise our immune system, makes it much harder to fight off infections. Okay, forgiving people have lower blood pressure at baseline, just when they come into the laboratory. And you can identify forgiving and unforgiving people based on questionnaires. Just some people are better at it than others. Guess what? The forgiving people, their blood pressure is lower. So they're going to respond less with an increase in stress as well, because they're starting from a lower point. Chronic levels of anger and hostility. So now we have the flip side of forgiveness, unforgiveness. Unforgiveness goes along with anger and hostility. That's associated with higher rates of heart disease. And they've done these studies, and these are studies over many decades, showing that if you are an angry and hostile person early in life, you're going to have an increased risk of heart disease later on in life, and also have a shorter lifespan. Some really good evidence linking anger and hostility. 6 times the risk of heart disease for angry and hostile people compared to those who are less angry and hostile. And so, you know, hey, long life, longevity, that's a good thing most of us want. And so forgiveness is a road to that. Forgiveness therapy, as created by people like Worthington and Enright, has been shown to lead to increases in self-esteem. You feel better about yourself as you learn how to forgive others. Sense of inner peace, who doesn't want that, right? Reduced anxiety, depression, fewer post-traumatic stress symptoms. So forgiving people and people that learn to forgive handle stress better, whether we're talking about the everyday hassles, minor stressors, the slow drip of everyday stress, or the big major personal upheavals and catastrophes, what we call traumatic stress. Excuse me. You may have heard we're dealing with lots of fires around here in California, Northern California especially. Fortunately for us, where we live here in Davis, the closest fires, we had ones about 20 miles away a couple of weeks ago. Those have long been contained, but got some really bad ones 100 miles away. So please pray for the people involved and all the responders and firefighters out there trying to save people's homes. The result has been the air has been really, really bad and very smoky, ashes all over the place in our yard. And so it's more of a nuisance for us, but we're safe from the fires, but the air has been bad. So it leads ones to cough a lot and that sort of thing. So dealing with that here this morning. Thank you for your grace and understanding as I speak to you. So let me talk to you about this study. I love this. This is like my favorite study. I think it's one of the most important ones, but also well-conducted piece of research in the science of forgiveness, because it's about the physiology. When we think about being hurt by someone else, our body responds. Even if we don't respond psychologically or consciously, at an unconscious level, our body still responds to that hurt in this fight or flight response. The body releases chemicals whose purpose is to deal with the stressor, to prepare us for danger, right? And it's been that way throughout history. Our ancestors have systems, physiological systems that were designed to deal with threats, to deal with the unknown, to deal with uncertainties. We have the exact same wiring, biology today, but now our hurts are different. We're not running from the saber-toothed tiger anymore, but we are running from, or running to, and actually, attacking those who have attacked us or hurt us or harmed us. So what happens when we replace unforgiving responses with forgiving responses? What happens though if we harbor grudges and hold grudges and ruminate about our hurts? What happens inside our bodies and our brains when this happens? Well, this was an interesting study where people came into the laboratory. Oh, you like this. This was research that was conducted by a researcher at Hope College. So Hope College, which some of you may know, is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Researchers, some of the best research on forgiveness has taken place at Hope College. And so respondents, these were volunteers, I think probably college students like most of the psychology research, came into the laboratory, and they were asked to just think about a situation where someone hurt you, someone harmed you. And I have the actual instructions here. Try to recall a particular time when someone upset you. I think they asked specifically about parents in this particular experiment. I guess, as parents, what we do sometimes to our kids, we upset them. Made you angry or annoyed or hurt you. Describe the experience in as much detail as you can. So they had to engage in this imagery about, what happened, who was involved, what the situation was, how long ago did it happen, how did you respond, what angered you, what hurt you, and so on. Right? So really got into it at a very deep, detailed, nitty-gritty level. This was in terms of the actual, to get a good forgiving opportunity to occur. Then they were assigned to do one of four things in response to that hurt, in response to this situation they were dealing with. This is what they call the emotional imagery paradigm. So you're asked to imagine different situations or different responses. So first thing you could do is you could rehearse the offense, and they're actually told to do that. So we want you to think about this, to rehearse it, how painful this was, what memories surrounded this, right? Think about how you were treated, that sort of thing. You would think that would be a very unforgiving response, and so it is. So there were two unforgiving responses. The second one was holding a grudge, nursing a grudge. Think about the fact that you were victimized in this situation. Now, you might think that's a bad thing to ask people to do, but listen, people are doing this already on their own. They're just trying to create a condition where this happens in the laboratory to see what would happen. They want to see what would happen in their physiology, in their stress response while they were engaging in the unforgiving. And that was compared to two forgiving responses, which was doing just the opposite. It was empathizing with the offender. So develop empathy for the person. In this case, it was their parent, right? And that's considered to be a very pivotal response in turning the victim from unforgiveness and beginning a forgiveness response. So think about the offender's humanity, right? Empathize with them. Maybe imagine yourself being in the same situation. How would I have responded if I was that person who did this thing? Knowing that I've done this perhaps many times as well. I put myself in this person's position, try to understand it from their point of view. That would be a forgiving response. And then the second forgiving response was actually granting forgiveness, decisional as well as emotional forgiveness, which is, again, is not forgetting, denying, ignoring, condoning, excusing, and all those things, right? But deciding to let go of the negative thoughts, feelings, and potential behavior. So how does this affect the stress response? And they were measuring, as you can see in the little image there, they had electrodes put on the forehead. On their forehead, that measures a stress response, especially like anger, right? When you're mad, angry at someone, your brow furrows, right? That's the corrugator muscles in your face. So you can measure that through what they call facial electromyography. It's measuring electrical signals. And it could be very slight. You may not even notice or see when a person is having that in their forehead, but the recording equipment, very sensitive, can pick that up. Also measuring heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tension, and then sweat measured through electrodes placed on the palm of your hand. When you are stressed, your hands get more sweaty, and that's very easy to measure through these electrodes. Okay, so what was the effect of thinking about these four different ways of responding to this hurt, to this offense, by this imagery? Well, it turned out, I guess not surprisingly, unfortunately, that unforgiving thoughts. So the first two conditions, holding a grudge, right, rehearsing the hurt, ruminating over it, produce more stress, was more stressful. So more physiological arousal went up. But when they engaged in the forgiving imagery, when they engaged in empathizing with the offender or actually granting forgiveness, the physiological stress went down in response to remembered offenses. So let me show you a couple of graphs just to show you. This is real science with real data. This is EMG. So this is the facial muscle. This is the muscles in the forehead, which basically is indicating unpleasant emotional stress, probably anger or resentment, okay? 4 conditions. So you see these 2 lines that are higher than the other 2? These are the 2 unforgiving responses. So this is measured over time. They measure this in 4-second, very quick, rapid bursts, right? But the equipment is very sensitive and can pick up changes in microvolts. So when they're rehearsing the hurt or holding the grudge, you see more activity in the corrugator EMG in the forehead. However, when they were engaged in the forgiving imagery, look what happened, flat across the board, right? So no difference, no changes. So less physical stress, less physical tension expressed in the forehead. Here's 2 more graphs. So on the left is heart rate. When you're stressed, your heart rate increases, right? Because physiologically, from a survival point of view, that equipped us to deal with the stressor, to run away from or to fight it. In this case, engaging in the unforgiving imagery was associated with greater increases in heart rate from baseline before they thought about the offense to when they thought about it. And then a slower recovery back when now you're no longer thinking about the offense. So they measure changes over time, and you see the 2 forgiving responses, less increase in heart rate compared to the unforgiving. And then skin conductance, which is the sweatiness of the hands, again, a measure of physiological stress, shows an increase much higher in the 2 unforgiving conditions compared to the 2 forgiving conditions, right? So on all the outcomes they were measuring, stress, physical stress, blood pressure, cardiovascular stress, and then physical stress is measured in sweaty palms, what was happening was that people who were unforgiving were showing greater physiological stress response, suggesting, now, they're not showing that they're getting sick because of this, right? There's a leap there. You don't die because of sweaty palms, right? Or sweaty palms doesn't mean you're going to get sick. So there's a few more dots to be connected. But it's suggestive that if you constantly and sustainably respond to threats in your interpersonal world, like being offended easily, or actually something happening to you that you have to forgive someone, but you don't forgive, you choose not to forgive for various reasons, that could take its toll over time with chronic stress and chronic physiological arousal. And over time, we know that can lead to health problems down the road, whether it's cardiovascular disease, whether it's immune system, infectious disease outcomes, that there's long-term implications to these short-term changes in physiological arousal. So I think it's really, really good study just for that reason, although it wasn't connecting it to health outcomes. It's showing plausible pathways by which that might occur. So good stuff. Now, so I mentioned that there are different models for how to forgive. So in our last 10 minutes or so before I open it up for questions and conversation and insights that you all, I'm sure that you all have lots of questions, no doubt. How to forgive? What have we learned from taking principles and steps and programs? And they've done research. Again, there's like somewhere around 1,300 studies in the science of forgiveness. As I mentioned, there's no way anybody could master this. It's a mountain that nobody can scale, and it hasn't peaked yet, I don't think, much like gratitude. In fact, it's a little further advanced than gratitude right now. A lot of stuff, okay, but one of the most often used in clinics by counselors, again, validated and verified through laboratory and real-world research, is the REACH model of forgiveness. And this was put forth by Everett Worthington Jr. Now, Everett Worthington is a friend of mine, and he's been studying gratitude for about a quarter of a century, knows more, and actually has had to deal with more in his own life in terms of forgiveness. A couple of years after he started his research, his mom was the victim of a home break-in, and she was actually murdered. She lived alone by herself. She was in her, I think, in her 80s. And then I think it was 1996, a year before I met him. New Year's Eve, there was a break-in, and I guess the perpetrator didn't know someone was going to be there and was surprised, and just, he killed her. And it was just tragic. And he had to, he wanted justice, but he also was consumed by hatred for this person. And you got to look up some of his stories and his videos, because he really talks about the process that here's someone who was researching forgiveness, right? And now it's like, why am I doing this? Who am I writing this stuff for? If it's not for me. What he had, the struggles he had to go through, I thought was quite inspiring. And then a few years later, about 5 years later, his younger brother commits suicide, and he blamed himself. So he had to now forgive himself he thought he was partly responsible. I should have been there. I should have known. His brother was severely depressed, and here he is, a counselor who's written about forgiveness. And he said, I was unable to help my brother, and everything he had to go through and work through to make sense of all of that. So on the way, he's got credibility. He's got what they call street cred, because he's gone through this in his own life. So the 5 steps in the REACH model: number 1, recall the hurt. Number 2, empathize with the offender. 3 is the altruistic gift of forgiveness. 4, commit to forgive. And H is hold on to forgiveness. So just mention these briefly, because I want to save some time to open it up. So recall the hurt. We've kind of alluded to this already. So yeah, there has to be something to forgive. If you ignore it, overlook it, excuse it, minimize it, forget about it, there is no hurt, right? So to heal, you have to face the fact that you've been hurt. Recall the wrongdoing, right? Not necessarily to think about the person as a bad person or, in a negative way, or to, kind of wallow in victimization or self-pity, but just kind of come to a clear understanding of the wrong that has been done. So he says, you got to do this first, right? And then you make a decision to forgive. So that's the decisional forgiveness. Again, the first step, recalling the hurt. Decide you're not going to pursue, retaliation or payback for this person, but you're going to treat this person in a positive way, right? But first, to do this, you have to recall the fact that there's something there that has to be forgiven, because without there being a crime or an offense, there's nothing to forgive. You won't have this process. Okay, the second step is E. E stands for empathizing with the offender. Now, that could be very difficult. That would give me, I never had a situation like Worthington went through, fortunately, to deal with, but how do you put yourself in the position of the person who's done this to you, right? Or to a loved one? Empathize with them. Pretend, you are this person. Try to understand it from their point of view, why he or she hurt you. You don't minimize or downplay it, and maybe it wasn't personal. Maybe it's just due to something they were going through, and that's why this happened, So not taking it personally can be part of it, and they're not thinking about hurting you. They're just kind of lashing out, right? And you are just on the receiving end of their pain. This step has helped me realizing that people hurt people because people are hurt, right? You've heard that before, that hurt people phrase, that everyone is flawed, everyone has faults, everyone is broken. So it doesn't surprise me when people do things like that to each other. That God forgives broken and hurting people, because broken and hurting people are all that there are. God loves hurting and broken people, because hurting and broken people are all that they are. That's all he has to love, right? So it's not surprising when that happens.
You don't chew gum as much anymore?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a gum.
I have a question.
Question, yes.
So, first of all, thank you so much for coming and for helping us, and really appreciate it. And I did hear you the last time. So if you have a situation where you have a relationship with an individual and they have done things that that are bad and that would require forgiveness, but yet they've never asked for forgiveness, but you still forgive them, but they keep committing the same infraction, for lack of a better term,
yes,
over time, whether it be every year or every 5 years, or the trust that starts to develop is so easily flushed away when they commit the offense again. How does one handle I mean, what we learn at Hope for Life also is, forgiveness is for the one that's forgiving as well.
Right.
It's free.
Right.
It frees you.
Right.
And desperately looking for this freedom, but first of all, never being asked for forgiveness, having forgiven, and then the infraction being committed again and again, whether it's every year or 3 or 5 or whatever. Very difficult. This is about personal situation that I'm having.
Very difficult, right? I mean, certainly it's a little bit easier if the person is, repentant, wants to, show some restitution or ask for an apology, and there's, really good ways to apologize and less good ways to apologize and so forth. And all those contribute to our ability to forgive. But you're quite right, that forgiveness is something that we do for ourselves. Right, quite apart from their behavior. A lot of it has to do with the nature of the relationship, as well as how long it's gone on, and what need there is to have reconciliation versus termination of the relationship. It sounds like a long-term relationship that there's reasons to want to make things work. But I realized a long time ago that change is very difficult, especially it's hard to change ourselves, let alone other people, right? And the only thing we really have control over is ourselves and our response and our reaction to the situation, or to what is being done in the situation. So
terminating a relationship of such a intimate nature in cases where it's family or direct relation.
You can't, right, that's right.
And so the way I handle it is, Dr. Emmons, is I do it with boundaries. I learned from my wife a phraseology, and a phrase rather, and that is, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So, you forgive to a level of a boundary that you have to place in order not to be hurt again. And then you have to watch that boundary, and of course, with God, God by your side always,
yes.
trying to analyze the reason for the infraction, or the motivation back from the reaction, or the limitations of the individual who commits the infraction. It's a very taxing process, but at the same time, because I realize that it's for me as well, and that's kind of selfish. You try your best to learn how to have the tools to forgive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's selfish at all, because you're going to put yourself in a much more advantageous position for your relationship with other people, right? Because this is one part of you, and one part of your life is with this person, but then there's all your other interactions, and how you'll treat other people is based upon your ability to extend forgiveness in this very difficult situation. So I think you're right. I mean, creating boundaries, and that's why we don't get to that last step of the reconciliation, because it's not wise, because you're going to put yourself in that situation again. And I know counselors, and I don't deal with this level because I don't do therapy. And so most of you are more familiar, and some of you are in the business of providing, care and delivering services therapeutically. You're advised not to put yourself in a position where you could, potentially get harmed again, whether psychologically, emotionally, or certainly, especially physically. So I think the boundary idea is a very valid one, very powerful, and it's necessary for future protection. But yeah, again, it is the decision you make, and how you handle that situation, and the message that you're sending by doing so. In the person who doesn't realize, how do you forgive someone who never asked for an apology, who doesn't admit their wrongdoing, or who blames you for it, right? Is something that we have to work out, on our own, with the help of counselors necessary, certainly with God's help. I mean, 83% of the people are saying they need God's help to forgive. So that seems to me to indicate something that this is very difficult to do on your own. Thank you for that great question. Let me just go through the rest of these. A is just giving the gift of forgiveness. I already mentioned that when you forgive someone, you're giving a gift. They don't certainly deserve it. They haven't earned it. They haven't merited it. They may not ask for it. They may abuse it. Just like when you give grace to someone, right? You may regret that you did so, because they may squander it, right? Just like the prodigal son squandered the inheritance, right? But then he came back and was repentant, and he was totally forgiven. C is commit. So commit to forgive. Take a stance, make an intention to forgive. Right? Say, and I think that goes beyond the decisional forgiveness to something which is deeper. They say, make write a note to yourself, or it's like taking a vow that, I'm going to forgive this person, and you stick to that. You hold on to that. You press into that, because there's going to be times where, you backtrack. Think, well, did I really forgive this person? It's this process, and you have to keep going back and keep retracing your steps. It's kind of the 2 steps backward, 1 forward, 2 forward, 1 back, and so on. And H is holding on to forgiveness. Again, surely tempted to doubt that we really forgave. How do we really forgive this person? Because we can't forget what happened. I got to hold on to that, and I got to press into that. There were times where maybe they do something again, like you mentioned, that it's clear that they haven't, really moved forward. They're still doing the same sort of behavior. And I need to revisit this, maybe go through the steps again. So it's not always a one-way linear trajectory toward forgiveness, but there can be, I think, regression and so forth. But making that decision at both the decisional level as well as the emotional level, I think is just the key to get started. I have a couple other ideas that I want to share with you as well before we wrap up. Okay. So I have a brother, twin brother. There he is. You didn't know that, did you? That I have a twin brother. Actually, all right, we're not identical twins, but there's a term out there. I think this was coined by Dr. Enright, one of those 2 expert forgiveness gurus. He talks about becoming forgivingly fit. I like that term, forgivingly fit. So what he's saying is that we can't always go to the finish line first, right? We got to start very small. We can't become an expert, skilled at forgiveness, are the very tough things to forgive, unless we can start small, take like small steps, or, baby steps, start small. So what he says we need to do is go through regular forgiveness workouts. We can strengthen our forgiveness muscles, right? So he says, you build up your forgiving heart muscles slowly, and then incorporate more regular workouts into the process. So make a commitment. Maybe first of all, when someone harms you, and think about small things, maybe it's bad behavior on the road, on the freeway, which I'm sure you don't have in Florida, but we have here in California sometimes, right? How do you respond to a driver who gets too close, behind you, or who passes too close in front of you, or whatever, right? Doesn't allow you in to merge when you're trying to get on the freeway. Or you can get back at them, right? Or you can just ignore it, or you can be nice to the next person, right? Or maybe, think about your relationships and not talk negatively about people. So you don't have to say good things, maybe not replace the bad, what you would have said with the good, but just omit saying something, which is harmful or hurting about this person. He's saying that those are small steps, and you can do those, right? You don't have to be a paragon of forgiveness, right? You don't have to be the father, the prodigal son, but just start small. And he says, gradually you'll strengthen your forgiveness muscles. It'll become easier to forgive the big stuff if you've laid the foundation to forgive the small stuff. And I think there's something valuable to that as well, right? Just like with gratitude, I mentioned, you can start to be grateful for the small stuff, and you can eventually be grateful when circumstances are not going the way we'd like them to, and develop this attitude of gratefulness at a deeper level, not just in response to, a benefit received. So I think there's some value in this notion of becoming forgivingly fit. Okay, so self-forgiveness, I think, is tougher. I forgot who asked the question right after the break, but I asked you to think about this, and experts tell us, yes, it is, because here's the key. Because psychologically and emotionally, we have to go through a different process. There's mental gymnastics involved in that, because, you are both the forgiver and the offender, right? You've done something wrong, and you want to forgive yourself. It's not about the other person now. It's about you. You're the wrongdoer and also the one who needs to forgive. So that makes it more complex, more difficult. But again, you still have both decisional as well as emotional self-forgiveness. Now it's about you as opposed to the other person. So you need to replace the negative thoughts, feelings with more positive ones. So instead of empathy, compassion toward others, we're talking about empathy, compassion toward the self. And there's a whole lot of research on the concept of self-compassion, which I think is very valuable. It's an important aspect of self-forgiveness, not beating oneself up when you've done bad things. Again, the realization that everyone has done bad things, because we're all flawed and broken in different ways. And it's inevitable that these sorts of things will happen. But the question becomes, how do you handle that afterward? Can you forgive yourself? Can you achieve, freedom from the shame, from the guilt that is will often occur when you've done something wrong to some other person? So there's ways to work through that, going through the same reach. And Dr. Worthington's book that I put up in the graphic with all his other books is about using the reach model, in this case for self-forgiveness, as well as for forgiving others. There's research on self-forgiveness, and it shows that over time, this unfolds in a certain way. That, again, it's not immediate. It's more of a process that takes some time. So over time, people who are able to forgive themselves, they feel less guilty for what they had done. They also accept the weight of harm for what they've done. They don't excuse it or minimize it or say, I didn't do anything bad, so I really have nothing to forgive myself for. No, they acknowledge that they had committed some harm. Eventually, they stop apologizing, which is an important step in forgiving oneself for the harm one's inflicted on others. They start to feel more forgiven by the person they harm. Whether or not this person actually extends forgiveness or not, it's their perception that they've been forgiven, which is super important, because ultimately that's all we have control over, is our own reactions to the situation. And they also felt more forgiven by God over time as well. So trajectory over time, it unfolds as a process, again, not overnight, not immediate, but something that can take some time and some work. Forgiveness is a choice. That's one thing that I've learned. I think one of the books was entitled that. I mean, again, it doesn't come easily or naturally to people. That's what makes it, I think, a spiritual topic. That's what makes it otherworldly. It's not always of this world. It requires supernatural, it requires help from above, as I mentioned. I'm going to give you a little assignment here, but first, okay, I want to show you this last video clip, which is very short, but it's really, really powerful. And it's that which I show in my class. And I find this inspirational, because if someone can forgive this, let me see, I'm going to try to go to new share. Hopefully this will work. Okay, if we can pull this, if this person can pull this off, then we can pull off forgiveness as well. Hopefully it doesn't go into ads again.
Distance.
And it is.
It's made it clear that the best memories don't happen miles apart. They happen when we're all...
Here we go.
In tonight with one of the most potent powers on earth. It can change lives in an instant. Everyone has it. It's the power to forgive. Watch it now in action in Steve Hartman's Assignment America.
Thank you, Lord.
In a small apartment building in North Minneapolis, a 59-year-old teacher's aide sings praise to God for no seemingly apparent reason. Indeed, if anyone was to have issues with the Lord, it would be Mary Johnson.
For all you've done for me. He never had a chance.
In February 1993, Mary's son, Loramian Bird, was shot to death during an argument at a party. He was 20 and Mary's only child.
My son was gone.
The killer was a 16-year-old kid named O'Shea Israel.
I wanted justice. He was an animal. He deserved to be caged.
And he was. Tried as an adult and sentenced to 25.5 years, O'Shea served 17 before being recently released. He now lives back in the old neighborhood, close to Mary. This close.
He lives next door.
Next door.
How a convicted murderer ended up living a door jam away from his victim's mother is a story not of horrible misfortune, as you might expect, but of remarkable mercy.
A few years ago, Mary asked if she could meet O'Shea here at Minnesota's Stillwater State Prison. As a devout Christian, she felt compelled to see if there was some way, if somehow she could forgive her son's killer.
What'd she say to you? I believe the first thing she said was, look, you don't know me, I don't know you, let's just start with right now. And I was befuddled myself.
O'Shea says they met regularly after that. When he got out, she introduced him to her landlord, who, with Mary's blessing, invited O'Shea to move into the building. Today, they don't just live close, they are close. Clearly, Mary was able to forgive.
Unforgiveness is like cancer. It will eat you from the inside out. It's not about that other person. Me forgiving him does not diminish what he's done. Yes, he murdered my son, but the forgiveness is for me. It's for me.
For O'Shea, it hasn't been that easy.
I haven't totally forgiven myself yet. I'm learning how to forgive myself. And I'm still growing towards, trying to forgive myself and what it is I've done.
To that end, O'Shea is now busy proving himself to himself. He works at a recycling plant by day and goes to college by night. He says he's determined to pay back Mary's clemency by contributing to society. In fact, he's already working on it, singing the praises of God and forgiveness at prisons, churches, to large audiences everywhere.
Forgiveness is a powerful thing.
Yes, I'm grateful.
Which explains why Mary can sing her praise of thanks to her audience of one. Steve Hartman, CBS News, Minneapolis.
Isn't that amazing? That's I've seen that a lot of times. I show it every class of mine, and I still get the chills when she talks about how the cancer is, unforgiveness is like a cancer, and really super inspiring. So that's her story. So this is what I assign in my classes. You don't have to do it, but if it's something you want to do for your own personal edification and spiritual growth.
He loves homework.
Homework, you love homework? Good. I'm a teacher, right? So I assign homework. And so in my class last spring, last time I taught, I gave them a choice. They could do a gratitude assignment or a forgiveness assignment. I know you're all experts on gratitude right now. So you can choose to do this forgiveness. And so I asked them to write a letter. And they could write a letter of forgiveness or gratitude. This is the instructions for forgiveness. And I say, okay, write a letter where you're basically writing a letter of forgiveness to someone. Okay. I told my class, this is for their own benefit. So you're not going to actually send this to the person. I mean, unless they wanted to. But I didn't want to get too heavy with, with clinical and counseling issues, because that's not what we're trying to do. I just wanted to give them an opportunity to actually, live forgiveness at a psychological level. And then I asked them to use the REACH model, the recall, the hurt, extend, the goodwill, give a gift, commit to it, hold on to it, and work through. And it's helped them experience the power of forgiveness, even in the absence of feedback. So you don't know how the person's going to respond. But again, as the lady mentioned in the video, it's not about him. It's not about the other person. It's about you. So I said they could write a letter to someone you're no longer in contact with, or maybe someone who's passed away that nevertheless harmed you at some point, or they could forgive themselves. Again, in the video, he said, I haven't been able to forgive myself yet, although I'm working on it. So if this is the case, write a forgiveness letter to yourself. That's appropriate. So I said, 300 words, like one page, double spaced, and write as though you're addressing the person directly, dear so-and-so. And then don't worry about perfect grammar, spelling. We weren't grading for that. I just wanted them to really, embrace the concept of forgiveness and think about what's like to actually, try to extend, go through these steps, these various aspects of forgiveness. And I got to tell you, when I got the course evaluations back about a month later, a few of the students actually mentioned that this was the most valuable exercise they'd ever been given, the most valuable assignment they'd ever been given in their 4 years here at UC Davis. And a couple of students especially had been through very, very awful circumstances, victim of abuse of various sorts. And in fact, in one, some severe betrayal in relationships. And she said, now I get it. She said, now I understand forgiveness. I used to think it was this, and now I realize it's not that, but it's this. And she actually thanked me for giving this assignment. So that felt really good. That occasionally we do stuff that's valuable. In academia, it can really impact people and change people's lives. And so it did with this. So that's why I assigned that. And I'm sure I'll do it again when I teach this class again, coming up in January of this year. All right, let me close with this quote, and then I'll open it up for questions, answers, discussion, comments, reflections, and so on. Dr. Martin Luther King certainly knew a thing or two about forgiveness. And he said, we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. There is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. when we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies. So that's a great insight and a wonderful truth, and it can be a very important step on the road to forgiveness. So I'll end there, and I'm happy to take questions. I don't know if you'll take my answers, but I'll certainly take your questions or reflections, things that you've learned that work for you in forgiveness or don't work. We're all here to help each other, so I'm happy to hear from all of you guys.
Dr. Emmons, you are a pro at these Zoom meetings, so I'm going to open the chat so that you can also see some of the questions if anybody's asking, because sometimes not everybody can talk at the same time. So if anybody wants to unmute themselves, they can go ahead and do that. Or if someone wants to write a question, Dr. Emmons can choose to answer what he can. And please,
I have a question.
One second,
Helen.
please. 1 second, everyone, please.
I saw Lizzie raised her hand first.
Okay, and I saw Helen, so maybe go in that order.
Okay. So you're watching the whole thing, Dr. Emmons.
Now I see a third hand. Well, I can see about 20 people.
I put 49 on mine.
Or okay, maybe the chat is better after all.
Okay, Lizzie, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Emmons. Thank you very much for your insight, your knowledge.
Thank you.
I've learned so much this morning. I just wanted to share out loud. I'm a big, I believe that we're only as sick as our secrets. And if we get honest, with ourselves and we rat ourselves out, that things can get better. And I'm trying to see what I wrote that I wanted to talk about, and now I can't find it, of course. Oh, okay. So you spoke about, and this really hit home for me, and it was kind of sad for me to realize I do this, when you were talking about the percentages of when people, they initially, they try to get even, or then they overlook it. Anyway, so I thought, my God, how interesting. And I had no idea I did this until you said it. So I tried to get even, Then I feel guilty that I'm trying to get even, so I overlook it. But then I realize I can't overlook it, so then I hold on to resentment, right? Because it's comfortable.
Yes.
And it's a reminder of this person is not worthy of my forgiveness, because I'm afraid to forgive, because I'm afraid that I'm going to get hurt again. But in the end, finally, I've been given the gift. I know what it is to forgive. I've forgiven 100% one person in my life. And that's a start, and that's my mom. And it is just the most incredible thing in the world. The last thing I wanted to say, you asked us to write down things that we couldn't forgive, like just straight out. And I wrote the murder of a loved one. I was thinking about my girls. And then I saw this video of this lady, and it was kind of like God just saying, hey, you're no different than the rest of humanity. If she can do it, you can do it too.
Yes.
But for me, that was just, it was actually 3: murder, adultery, and physical abuse. But the truth is, after listening to you, I think that not just myself, I think we're all capable of forgiving ourselves and others. And I think at the end of the day, not just for forgiveness, but for everything, it's a matter of a choice.
Yes.
It's a matter of everything. Everything in my life has been a choice, and I'm just so glad I came on, and I'm so glad I learned so much from you. I'm truly grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I've learned a lot from you, and thank you for sharing that. And we just don't know what we're capable of until we have to do it, I think myself, and I think of, having, family that I love, and boys and my wife. And if something happened, I know I say there's no way I could forgive that, right? But you just don't know what you're capable of, right? Until it actually happens. I think we have a potential, a capability that remains dormant. It remains latent in us. But then, if we tap into help, whether it comes from other people, from people who've been on the journey before, through God, through our belief system, I think there's no limit to the sorts of things that we're capable of doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So, Helen, I think you're next. I don't know if you can hear us, Helen.
I can hear you. I'm
There we
sorry.
go.
I apologize for the mess, but Mary Ellen had to come to my house because she was disconnected. So that's why we're both wearing masks here. Okay. My question, Dr. Emmons, you have been so valuable, and I'm holding back. Trying to hold back tears because one of my questions is, what about if the person you need to forgive? Or first of all, can somebody's idiosyncrasies be so deeply ingrained that they can't change or move or go to the next step of forgiveness? And the second one is, what if the two people that you had the problem with are dead? How does the assignment work? Do I still write a letter?
Yes. Indeed, yes, because again, if you would take the perspective that forgiveness is something that you're doing for yourself, whether or not, you know, they are still accessible or not, or whether or not you can reconcile with them physically, it almost becomes irrelevant, right? Because it's about you letting go of the negative feelings and thoughts and you know, things that are holding you back, things that are imprisoning you, right? As the lady in the video said, it's about, you know, becoming free from these chains of bondage that she's in by being, you know, angry toward this person who did this horrible thing. And so whether or not she ever contacted him or, you know, moved next door, I mean, unbelievable as that is, right? Is something that she needed to do for herself. It didn't require the physical restoration or reconciliation. So yeah, it's definitely, you can do that. But I think, you know, go through the same steps though, whether it's the REACH model or some other much more elaborate, more in-depth model. And I get it. It's very easy to say, here's 5 ways to do that. And if we do those 5, you know, we're going to forgive, we're going to feel free, we're going to not have guilt or shame anymore, the other person's going to forgive us and all those things. And we know the reality of life is much more messy than that, right? And we know people spend years in therapy or, you know, in prayer, trying to achieve some degree of peace from situations like this. There's no shortcuts, there's no easy answers, but I think just the notion that it's for ourselves is really freeing for people, right? Because then it doesn't matter the other person's response. It doesn't matter if they asked for forgiveness or that they made amends or apologized or sought restitution. It almost becomes irrelevant because it's something that we are doing for ourselves. There was another part to your question, I think. I was trying to write it down, but did I miss something? Going through the sequence. Oh, 75%. So yeah, I mean, the notion that 75% of the people would be all of a sudden cured or healed if they believe that they were forgiven, that's very powerful. And I mean, that's the person speaking from experience. So that suggests that most people are not doing forgiveness by default, right? Easily or immediately or automatically, but it's something that needs to be learned. We need to train ourselves, I think, to do that, because it's just more natural to repay hurt with hurt, right? Than to repay hurt with goodness or kindness or compassion.
Okay. My question was, I've been guilty of this. I think my feelings are so deeply ingrained.
Yes.
It's hard for me to change. And in my case,
right.
It was my mother, who I feel I had no childhood. My childhood was ruined. And how do I make amends with that? And I don't want it to be ingrained. I want it to be, you know, removed so that I can forgive. Mm-hmm. And it's very hurtful. And one of the things that have helped me is I have wonderful friends who also had terrible childhoods. So we've been able to communicate, but it's not a professional counseling. It's more of a friendship.
Yes.
And how do I get past this? Because I know eventually it's hurting me. Not being able to, having the anger, hatred, bitterness, resentment that I still feel.
Let me ask you, so do you have children?
Yes.
So you are a different kind of mom than your mom was to you, correct?
Not really.
No.
She became like a role model,
Mm-hmm.
more like a negative role model. Now I have more awareness. I became a social worker and learned so many things. I didn't realize I had these feelings until my late adult life. I didn't realize growing up. So yes, I've changed my ways as far as with one of my sons is autistic, so it's very hard. I had a disability growing up and he has a disability. So kind of like my mother, and I a very negative role model, and I don't like the feelings that I have towards her, even though she's passed.
Right.
So I let go, because in letting go, I'll free myself. Like you said, not just for the person's not here, but I would have to sort of let myself go free out of this, these feelings, these negative feelings that I have.
It's a lot of work. That puts a burden on you, right? Because you have to not only let go of those feelings, but then you have to become the perfect mother, to be the anti-mother to your children, right? The mother that your mother was not.
Right.
So that puts you in a very difficult position. But I think you're right. Just, the awareness of, without awareness, you have no chance to break that cycle, right? And because we're such a product of our past, because not just because of what we've learned and what we saw, just also because of temperament, because what we inherited biologically, we have certain tendencies, to respond in a certain way, and our fight or flight system is just so automatic and unconscious, and it's activated because of situations we've gone through, our difficult past, and so that becomes the default mode, and so we have to turn the switch. We have to override that every time. We have to become aware of that. And we, very difficult to get to the point where we can say we've totally, overcome this, training in the direction that we want to move to, a new direction. But I think without that awareness and forgiveness, I don't think is often or always, this complete, perfect picture of achieving complete understanding and restoration. Even if you engage in that reach model and you extend our empathy. Okay, why did she do this to me? Well, she probably had a terrible childhood as well, right? And maybe she did or not. It's I don't know, but some people find some comfort in that, right? And as I mentioned, just knowing that we're all flawed and broken, it doesn't surprise me when people mess up and hurt me anymore. I used to say, how dare they do that sort of thing, and get indignant about it and so forth. And now I'm actually surprised there's not more of it, because we've all, as the scripture says, sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But when it hurts us personally, it's hard to take, and when it hurts someone who we love, that's hard to take too.
Liana, you have.
One second. But I think, Dr. Emmons, you gave wonderful tools today. And like, for example, forgiveness is a choice. And I hear that Helen here has the choice. She's choosing, she would like to. So I think that's a wonderful first step.
Also, forgiveness is a process, Dr. Emmons said, and people don't understand that, I don't know, I mean, we deal with this every day. It's like so many tools. One of it is that it's a process, and it's step by step by step. What were you going to say, Amor?
So, and that, I think maybe Helen also, that if you complete that homework, just to write a letter to your mom, and be able to do that process, and, just the desire to begin to let go. So I think in today's class, you got a few nuggets and tools to be able to do that. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves too, especially as Christian people. We know we should forgive. We ought to forgive, right? Forgiving is the right thing to do. But yet, just because we're like everybody else, and we find ourselves struggling with forgiveness, it adds another layer of pressure onto it and makes it more difficult to accomplish. Like, well, what's the matter with me? You know, I'm a very bad person of faith here because, you know I've been forgiven, right? And so forth. And, you know, I can't forgive 70 times 7. I can't even forgive 7 or 1 time. You know, it's like, I should do this. I ought to do this. What's wrong with me? You know, and that adds a considerable layer of pressure onto this, making it much more difficult.
I think, Dr. Emmons, you hit something very much on the head, which we talk about also all the time at Hope for Life. We know it in our heads that we've been forgiven. It's all here. And here, we don't know we've been forgiven. And we can't give what we don't know. And I don't mean know it in information. I mean in our souls and in our spirits and in our beings. But Ileana wants to ask a question. She's been waiting for
And
that.
before we move on, I wanted to just say, if
Could you move us along, would you?
if we can keep it to one question so that other people can have the opportunity to ask, that would be fantastic.
Gigi, thank you. Very important. Yeah, let's be considerate of everybody in the room.
I believe everything that everybody has said. I have a lot of the same problems that Helen has had. But one thing that I can say is that God, if we ask Him to help us in the forgiveness process, and like I said, the doctor said, it's a layer, it's a process. So we have to go. My process has been, like he said, 70 times 70. You know? It's been like, it seems like forever. But anyways, what I wanted to say to you is so much thank you for that reach process, because that's going to help me and a lot of women a lot, because I do abortion recovery. And when I do this, these women have so much problem in letting go, not only the shame, but the guilt of believing that God has forgiven them, because most of them are Christians. So it's a little bit easier with Christian women because they know God has forgiven them, but forgiving themselves is so in there because they have killed their own. So it's really, really, really hard. So I thank you very much, because that's one of, of the things that I go through all the time. And if you can give me any more information of anybody else, I would appreciate it.
I think that's where scripture comes in, is very valuable, because there's so much good imagery about our sin and forgiveness and how God handles that. I forget which psalm it is, 130, where that God takes our sin and casts it out into the ocean, and I heard a preacher say he not only does that, but then he posts a sign that says no fishing, right? So that the sin that we can't forget, he can't remember, right? And so forth. And so if we use metaphor or imagery like that, I think that can be really, really helpful way of thinking about, and then not thinking about our sin any longer, because God has forgotten about it.
Right. And what I do believe is that if God forgave us, who are we not to give ourselves?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gigi.
Thank you.
So we're getting a few comments on the side. I see them more as comments instead of questions.
Good. Those are my favorite types.
If anybody has a question, let's take advantage and ask questions to Dr. Emmons, because he can actually answer. I mean, I think we all have an opinion and ideas.
Samantha, I see Samantha's hand was up.
Yeah,
Samantha.
Has been all morning.
Go, Sam.
Hi, good morning. I had a question earlier, and I even asked Giovanna and Lucky. I know, okay, if you're in a relationship.
Take your time. It's okay, Samantha. Don't take your time.
Well, I want to be aware of, the time I'm taking, but if you've made the decision, you've committed to forgive the person, or you're going through a certain season, which is causing someone to act a certain way, but it's hurtful to you, and you've committed to forgive them, but because of the pressure everyone's under, the hurt keeps coming. So I guess my question is, I mean, I remember reading somewhere in the word that, you know, we're to guard our hearts. So I want to know if, I don't know if I'm guarding my heart or if I'm being spiteful, but I almost feel like, okay, I need to, until we get past this time, this season, if I'm trying to guard my heart by, you know, kind of shutting down and not opening myself up to continue to get hurt this way, is that unforgiveness? Am I being unforgiving? I mean, I love, because this was one of my biggest questions about apology is an important step in order to forgive, because I am being vocal and saying, when you do this, it makes me feel like this. But the person isn't apologizing or even acknowledging, yeah, you're right, I am doing that, and I'm sorry, I want to try to stop, or just bear with me. It's just muteness. So then I want to be a mute as well and just go about my day, keeping myself away from the possibility of continuing to hurt, because I have committed to forgive, and I don't want to hold this against the person, and I want to move forward and get back to whatever is coming for us down the road after this hard pressed season. Yes. But then it's like every day my feelings are hurt.
Well, I mean, again, from the perspective of what I've learned, just from immersing myself in the literature and also, of course, living life, you have to have the hurt, right? Because without the hurt, there's nothing to forgive. Accepting the pain is a critical part of this. But then, so it sounds like one can be at the stage where you're refraining, you're holding back, you're letting go of negative feelings or behaviors toward this person without necessarily instituting the positive feelings of compassion, warmth, goodwill, generosity, empathy, and all those things, right? So you can have one without the other. You can turn down the volume on the negative without turning up the volume on the positive, and that may come with time, over time, being this, long-term process. I don't know any more about your particular situation, but it sounds like that might happen. I do know there was at least a couple of research studies that showed that men and women forgive very differently. Okay, men, they like the decisional forgiveness. They want to make it more like a one-time thing, like a one-time decision. Okay, I forgive you. Boom, it's over with. Like, let's forget about it. Let's move on, right? Yeah, for women, it's much more of a slow, gradual thing. Probably because we're the ones who need more forgiveness, right? We want to get on with it. Why can't you forgive me? Why do you keep bringing this up? But we don't have always the patience to work through it at a more nuanced level. So that's kind of interesting finding from the studies as well. Difference in just how men and women do it. Forgive very differently. And I think knowing this, being sensitive to different styles can be very helpful too in making sense out of it all.
I have a question, Dr. Emmons. I have a hard time with the boundaries that I set upon people that I forgive. It seems to be a switch in my case. So my question is, how do I moderate, if you will, for lack of a better word that I cannot think of it right now, this forgiveness boundaries, these boundaries that I place on forgiveness on the people that I have supposedly forgiven. But my thing is, all right, I forgive you, but I'm not going to deal with you. I'm through. I don't want this person in my life and over with.
Sure. It makes a lot of sense to me, right, that forgiveness is happening without reconciliation because you've decided for various reasons that it would be a wiser course of action. It's very hard to forgive in a way that God forgives. I mean, there's a reason why forgiveness is divine, right? To forgive unconditionally, without boundaries. I mean, how many people can do that? Not very many, because we live in such a conditional world that says that, if you do this, if you do X, I will do Y, okay? If you apologize, I may or may not forgive, but I'm more likely to, right? But it requires you first making the first step, right? If you never do this again, maybe I can forgive you then. So it's always following, it's always reactive, it's always contingent upon somebody else's actions or, you know, what they say they will do, as opposed to unconditional forgiveness, which is a very high standard, right? That very hard to meet. So I think that's more, you know, the norm and the exception. I think that's when, you know, we go back to our role models. We go back to whether it's scripture or people like the lady who forgave the guy who killed her son, and she's extending unconditional forgiveness, quite apart from what he had done. And so I don't know how we get there. I know that's our challenge, you know, but to achieve this freedom that we so desperately want and need, it requires something like that. And in the absence of that, I think it makes perfect sense to be in a position where, you know, to minimize future risk of harm and grievance and hurt. The question is, you know, which releases you from your emotional prison, right? And for some, it might be that just, you know, you deciding I'm going to terminate this relationship because I need to invest and have emotional energy for other relationships. And that, in that case, is the wisest course of action.
So it's okay to then, I mean, for what I'm not understanding you right, but maybe I am. It's okay to just sometimes or just block that person from your life, and yes, you've forgiven them.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
You do block them from Facebook, block them from Twitter, whatever you have to block them from. We need to block those who are bringing out the worst in us, right? Because I think we need to surround ourselves with those who bring out the best in us, you know, and life is too short to spend it focusing on the grievances and those who have harmed us. And it does us no benefits. So
thank you.
I'm with you. Thank you for that.
There's someone whose screen name is Stuart Lata, but I think her name is Xaviera.
Yeah, she does not look like a Stuart to me.
Yes.
You can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, that is my husband, but yes. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Emmons, just for everything that you've shared today regarding forgiveness. And as I was, you know, making some comments, you know, basically that sometimes in the past, I've confused forgiveness with reconciliation. And thank you for the comments and just the clarity, so that I know that forgiveness is just it's for me, and it's between me and God, where reconciliation does involve the other person. And just looking at the model that you shared, the charts from that research study, looking at the chart, not only was forgiveness, you know, a key, but the empathy, you know, was as well, that you have to empathize with the person who's offended you. And sometimes that's hard, you know, looking at the clip that you shared. I did have a child who was killed, you know, and not in the same situation, you know, as on the video, but 6 years ago. And so even though it was 6 years ago, it's still on the anniversary, we call it his angelversary, you know, it continues to come up. And there's often times while I was holding a grudge, you know, just like, how could someone do this to an innocent child? How could someone hurt? And then now learning, how can I empathize with the others? You know, there were several people that were involved with this, with the death of our son. And so it wasn't just one person, you know, that we had to forgive, but looking at a series, a group of people. But when is, just hearing other comments from everyone, you know, here today, when is it even appropriate to go back and tell that person or the other people, I forgive you? Because I feel, you know, after the death of our son, you know, we are still mourning. You know, we were still grieving his death, but everyone else went on with life as usual. You know, it's kind of like we're still
right. That's right.
Stuck, like we're working through our grief, but it's like, it's our pain. It wasn't their son, it was ours.
Right.
And everyone else, they're back as business as usual. And I feel if I would go to anyone one-on-one to say, oh, I forgive you for allowing this tree limb to fall on my son, for you, you know, building this park that was in a, you know, inappropriate location. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, that was 6 years ago. Who was your son again? And I know that might bring up other feelings, you know, for me as well.
Right.
Is it even appropriate, you know,
right,
to go back and say, I forgive you, or is it appropriate?
Well, you're obviously a very compassionate person, and my heart goes out to you for what you've been through. Obviously, a person also of deep faith, and but we just don't know what's in that other person's mind, right? And maybe they are living with this, right? Maybe that is a gift that you can give this person, right? Or the gift of freedom. We just don't know, right? Without further. So if that's something that you want to do and you feel comfortable doing, and you're at the point now where you can do that. That was something that I would encourage you to do, because I think that would help complete the whole process for you, right? Complete this to help just become another step in the healing process that a lot of us has occurred. But of course, you'll never be the same again. How could you possibly be the same again when something like this happens? But I think that's that's something you can decide and give it as a gift out of your selflessness, out of your compassion, and that could be really important for this individual. So that's just a few thoughts off the cuff that I would have there. But you're right. Sometimes people just don't know that they've harmed us, because it's not what they're going through. It's not their reality.
Right.
But it could be. We just don't know, until we're in that situation. What do we have to lose? But it could bring up some of the pain again. So we have to be aware of that possibility as well. But maybe now you're in a place where you can handle that. It sounds like with your faith and the compassion that you have and the support that you have from others, you may be able to do that now.
Yes, it's definitely helped. So I appreciate that. I mean, I have other hurts and things like with my mom, just other issues that I need to forgive. But as you asked the question initially, and people were like, yeah, if someone murdered my child, if someone did this, how, like, these are the big deals. But the big deals have happened,
Mm-hmm.
And yes, definitely moving towards it. And I know it has affected the people that were involved, but it's still hard for me to like face them, face to face, to even go. Yes. Some people have stopped their jobs, they were in construction. So I know it's affected them, but definitely not to the same extent. And almost, I don't know if they are worthy, some of that is like, I don't even know if I should try to go to them and say, I forgive you, I believe our actions, within our community, have showed our strong faith, but I was just wondering, is it even appropriate, on that level? But looks like that's something I need to continue to pray about and see God's guidance.
Or I wonder if, just expressing that to others like you are today, to all of us, right? That's the way of forgiving them. But just by, you're communicating that, right? You're broadcasting your forgiveness in a very social way. So it's not just now the private personal thing that you're doing or that you're doing with God, but you're sharing it with other individuals, right? So I think that's an important part of the healing process as well. It's like when we are grateful to someone, we might not thank them directly. Maybe we can't because, they were parents or others who've gone on. But we call attention to the good things they have done.
Wow.
Right. To heroes, to, people, first responders or healthcare or others that we want to call attention to what they've done. We can do so in a way that's not really directly with them, but in a way that is, validates what they've done. And I think the same thing can happen with forgiveness, obviously differently, but a similar sort of process psychologically for us as well.
All right. Thank you. And I'm new to the group, so everyone's a stranger to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
I came on because I saw that you were going to be here and talking about forgiveness. And so thank you so much.
Well, I hope it was worthwhile. Thank you for sharing. And, we're not strangers anymore.
We're family now. Family and forgiveness.
I wanted to go ahead and invite you, Xaviera. We have about 3 or 4 weeks of forgiveness classes coming up, and because you signed up, you will be receiving an email and some text reminders. There is a process that we teach also for forgiveness, and I just really want to encourage you to be connected, because we kind of like to do something that looks almost like an inventory of a wound.
Oh,
because we need to know what we're really forgiving. And Laura, who's here, and Lucky and Giovanna and us, we really dig into what is it that we're forgiving? Because sometimes we think we're just forgiving what someone said, but what someone said may have caused a hurricane of situations, you know? So
Also, we have other families, similar situation to yours. You can meet with them also, Kathy and all these people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, but Gigi, you were saying?
Yeah, so just this is such an incredible topic of forgiveness, and I think that the reach model that Dr. Emmons has taught us is fantastic, and we can incorporate it. But it's like everything. It's awareness of what is it exactly? Am I forgiving, and who? Because in your case, are we forgiving God? And some people might say, oh, who are we to forgive God? We teach that in the class too. I mean, whoever we're angry at, whoever we're blaming, whoever we're holding that resentment towards, it could be ourselves, our parents, someone who passed, it could be God, it could be religious leaders. I don't know, you name it. It doesn't matter. We still have to go through and see what exactly we need to forgive, and then really dig deep. So I just wanted to interject that. Sorry, Dr. Emmons.
No, that's wonderful. I think I should take your class, because I've realized now through this week and through today how little I know about forgiveness.
How little we all know.
That's right.
I think we're all learning, and I think it's a journey, and it's just little tools that we get from you, little tools we get from here, from there, from one person, another person, and you begin to incorporate them. And like everything else, you know, all of a sudden you realize this works better for me, or that is easier for me, and because we're all different. And I think this is why it's such a broad concept, and there's so much discovery on it, because it continues to enhance all of us, you know?
I think you're right. One size does not fit all, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Laura and then Mario. Laura and then Mario.
Laura
first.
Yeah, Dr. Emmons, I just wanted to say that this Hope for Life have a wonderful tool that I learned. I have been doing this for 5 years, and I realized that that I had to love people. And in order to love people, you know, I cannot love them if I don't forgive them. So the first step is that, you know, we have to forgive the ones that they hurt us, the one that hate us, you know, and not only forgive them, we have to love them and bless them.
Yes.
And this has been my process. And the only thing I can say that by doing that, the gift has been to me is the gift of peace. So I have been experiencing peace and miracle at my home just because of the obedience of forgiving. How many times?
70 times 7.
As many as you need.
As many times, 70 times 7. And
Thank you.
that has been wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Thank you. You know, someone mentioned about reconciliation, and that's come up a few times. And I think that's so right, just to think about this as something separate, because, you know, think about what happens if you have reconciliation without forgiveness. That's very bad, right? Because you can get back together, and the person, you know, they never forgive you. You never feel forgiven. It's like, it's the worst prison. It's better to be not reconciled, right? You know, and they keep bringing up what you've done, and you think you've moved past it, but, you know, you're together, but you're apart emotionally. Very uncomfortable, unpleasant place to be at. So it's, I think, a good reason to keep reconciliation separate from the process of forgiveness.
Mario, and then Jose, if you have, and then I think we end with that. So 2 more, and Mario.
Thank you, Dr. Emmons. You just clarified a few things that I was going to mention. I just want to turn it around, see what you have to say. It's about the forgiveness, that it's actually for the person.
Yes.
And I've been forgiven, much. And what I wanted to ask you was, and I've been here for about 3 years, and all this is in line with what we'll be learning in Hope for Life. And I appreciate you coming on, and it's amazing. But I want to ask you, I don't know if anybody has ever asked about this, how hard it is. I've been forgiven much, and it extended so much gratitude and grace to my God and my wife, who I've offended and hurt. Why is it so hard to show and everything's been covered, you know, for my part, show the gratitude and the thankfulness. And I identify with what you said, that men and women are different, and I identify with that part that if you forgave me, okay, let's move on. Let's not talk about it anymore. Don't bring it up. And I understand it in this process that it's a process and it takes time. But why is it so hard for me to show gratitude and love and appreciation for how much I've been forgiven? And I don't know if anybody asked about this. What do you have to say about that? And I kind of know, but I'd like to hear from you how hard it is to show that gratitude and thankfulness. Because I've been forgiven so much, and I don't think anything I can do, but I don't. I don't show my emotions. I just identify with that when you said, let's move on. Don't trigger that anymore. Don't bring it up. I know I'm wrong, but what do you have to say about that? And I appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you for that, Mario. I think you just showed a lot of emotion there. We're able to well articulate, you know, your experience and what you're going through. I mean, we've all been forgiven, I suspect, much more than we forgive. I mean, just think about our relationship with God, right? That none of us can, you know, out-sin the coverage of God's grace. I mean, that's amazing. How can we ever give back, you know, all that we've received? We can't, right? So I think there's going to be this imbalance or this gap between what we've received and what we're giving back. And there's a lot of ways we show gratitude that are not always verbal or expressive. And, you know, there's differences, you know, men and women, different levels of emotional expressiveness, even within each gender, that some people are more expressive than others. There's a lot of ways we can show gratitude and give back the good that we've received. If it's not in words, it could be in deeds, you know, it could be in gestures. There's a number of ways we can show and illustrate the fact that we know that we've received quite apart from what we've merited or deserved, and how can we give back the good we've received in a way which feels comfortable to us and feels comfortable and is appropriate in the situation and in the receiver, you know. And I think that's again, individual journey, as Giovanna mentioned, but again, there's not a simple way that we can all express it and it be equally meaningful, because the words are empty sometimes. We say thank you and the person knows that they're just devoid of any real depth of feeling. And so our actions oftentimes speak louder than our words.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go, I think, Jose and then Connie, and then we close. We don't want to leave you, Dr.
That's all right. My bladder can wait a few more minutes.
Okay.
This is a great discussion. I'm going to turn off my video to make sure that my audio goes through okay. I'll turn my video after I'm finished. I just wanted to put in my 2 cents worth about whether or not to tell the offender that we forgive them. You know, we don't have to. Most of the time, the offender will not really understand what we're coming through, or maybe resentful, or maybe they will reject us by when we approach them. When we have real or true forgiveness, we don't have to, we don't need to reach out to the offender because it's for us. I think sometimes we reach out to the offender and we think that we're going to help them in some way. But really, forgiveness is for us. And what I was thinking is that if you reach out to the other person, I think it's easier for us to first empathize with them, try to understand them, try to let them know that.
We lost him.
Okay, let's move
Well,
on.
that's a very good point. I think, yeah, just because we often, I think, sometimes the motivation, okay, for forgiving someone is we want to be seen as a forgiving person, right? It's almost like, you know, the phrase virtue signaling, which you hear a lot these days. I want people to think of me as a forgiving person, so I'm going to forgive you. You know, and you're quite right. The person would say, what are you talking about? I haven't done anything wrong, right? Well, I mean, who are you to forgive me, right? And so it's kind of like compassion, right? Sometimes we do compassion, helpful things because we want to be seen as a compassionate person. The heart is not really in it. We're just concerned with our behavior and how we look, the impression that we're giving off. And so that's why introducing the other person to it can sometimes complicate matters and can actually, I think, get in the way of true forgiveness. And so there's a good reason why it's for the self and not necessarily for other people.
Well, I going to that, I remember when I was going through my healing, and one of the things I did go to my dad to tell him I had forgiven him for everything he had done. And the first thing he did to me is like, what did I do to you, you know?
Oh, my mother too. My mother says, you really love strawberries and I gave you strawberries your whole life. I was a fantastic mother. I'm like, okay, next please, let's move on to the next thing.
So but I remember being all the steps I had taken towards forgiving my dad. I remember I went back because I became very resentful again. Like, what do you mean? Like, and I started mentioning, and he was like, I gave you housing. You went to one of the best schools. You did this, you did that. And I did this for you. I did that. And I'm like, okay. And then at that point, like what Jose said, I realized it had to be for me.
Yes.
Oh. And that has allowed me to have a relationship with him, not necessarily that I get his acknowledgement. And through the years, I have been able to hear him say, directly and indirectly, like how sorry he is for certain ways he behaved. And then I take that as him having those moments when he regrets and apologizes, you know? So, but thank you. Connie, I think you had one question.
Yeah, what do you do when your main thing you need, for me, it now boils down to, over my life experience, you know, numerous things. I was trying to make an analogy. I feel like, you know, Joe Frazier had 3 big matches with Ali. He won the first one, lost the second one, and he was pretty bloody. Okay. I feel like I've had 50 matches with Ali, and I maybe won 2 or 3 or 4 along the way, but most of them have been knockouts, and I've been on the mat, and I've had to slowly and painfully get up from a bunch of these life experiences. And I won't go into the list of what they are, but there was emotional abuse, there was rape, there was sexual abuse by a professor. It just went on and on. I need to learn to grieve in a healthy way. And I also have to forgive God, because I know I'm projecting my parents onto him. My parents did not protect me from the abuse in our home. And I guess I'm just projecting my parents onto God. It seems like he did nothing. I know I'm supposed to love him and everything, but I get stuck thinking that he didn't protect me. I get stuck there.
Yes. I think that that's another layer of, and many people have anger toward God, and even atheists, right, who don't believe in God are very angry at this God that they believe doesn't exist. And a lot of times it comes up because of, you know, profound suffering like that. I think that's something that's got to be, you know, worked through with a spiritual guide, right? A spiritual healer who can uncover the different, you know, images that you have, and a connection between, you know, heavenly fathers and earthly fathers, heavenly parents and earthly parents. There's no easy solution or easy way of saying, okay, here's a reach mile. Just pick each relationship and go through it, you know, and then everything is, the Band-Aid is over the wounds and so forth, because this is obviously a deep and profound situation that has gone on a long time in different contexts. But I think the fact that you're here and sharing this is an important part of the healing. We know that healing will not take place without that. And the fact that you show tremendous strength by getting, I mean, who could go 30 seconds with Muhammad Ali or any of the other people, let alone Joe Frazier and Mike Tyson, and you name your favorite boxer. So that indicates a tremendous resilience that you've shown. So I applaud you and commend you for that, Connie.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Is that it?
Fernando, why don't you say something, and then that's it.
Hey guys, Connie, that was beautiful what you shared. I just wanted you to know that with my broken masculine, your feminine just now was gorgeous, and how it just melted some of my my brokenness. And that wasn't what I wanted to say, but I feel like I just wanted to let you know that You're beautiful. And I appreciate what you just shared with us. What I did want to share, like my premeditated sharing, let me say, was the one thing that helped me, and then the one thing that this 3 hours blew me away about was the one thing that helped me a lot was I had someone who once taught me, he who angers you still controls you. And that was a huge part of my forgiveness, because the last thing I wanted as a sexual abuse child was to empower that person to keep controlling me the rest of my life. And I just remember him telling me, Fernanda, do you like being controlled? Like, oh, I hate it. That's why I work so hard at being so strong and powerful and not allowing people in close to me, is because I want to never be hurt again. And he said, well, if you refuse to forgive this person, then every time you bring it up or think about it, if you can instantly cry or become angry about it, they're still controlling you today. And I was so mad at that idea initially, like, that person has no right to still control me. And he's like, you're right, but you're controlling that. Like, you can deal with it and let it go and process it. And so that was huge for me. And then the thing that this specifically, what you guys shared and what you shared, which was weird because it's a totally different angle from what everybody else is talking about, was that's why I called my wife. I'm at the fire station right now. I called my wife, hey, babe, I know this has got to be hard for you. How's it going? And she said, I'm learning that, before I have to forgive you, I have to forgive myself first. And let me tell you, as her husband, I have been so hard on her for not loving me. And this just made me realize that she can't love me until she forgives me. Then she can't forgive me until she forgives herself first. And my job as her husband is not to, teach her anything. It's just to allow her to help her in any way I can, process and have the space and the time to forgive herself. Because if you ask me selfishly, I want her to love me well, but she can't love me well until she forgives me. She can't forgive me until she forgives herself. So the greatest thing I can be about is giving her space, her time. And I told her, she goes, yeah, this is a hard thing for me to deal with. And I said to her, it's strange. The more I hear this today, the kinder I want to be to you. And so I just wanted to give her her space. And I just wanted to thank you women in Hope for Life in particular, who just model feminine. Because I was sexually abused by my mom and by a woman, and by it was women that hurt me mostly in the abuse side of it, not the neglect side. But I had seen so many beautiful women here who've just helped me, be kinder to my wife, if that is a value, I guess.
Fernando. Dr. Emmons, your comment.
Well, as someone who talks for a living, I'm not often at a loss for words, but I would be right now. So I don't have much to add to that. That's beautiful. Thank you very much. And it's always wonderful to leave with a positive, hopeful message, right? Giving us all hope for life and inspiring. I'm going to go home and kiss my wife and make her breakfast. Well, she's got a head start on me today, so hopefully breakfast will be there. But it's a wonderful being able to do life together in this way, to connect with you guys through this miracle of Zoom. I feel close to you, even though I haven't met you, just through the sharing. So I hope we'll have future opportunities to connect once again.
Yes, hopefully you will, and maybe one of these days in person, once everyone can travel freely and it's better.
Would be wonderful. Would be a real gift.
And host you here. Thank you again so much for joining us, for gifting us with so much, and we truly, truly appreciate it. So let's give Dr. Emmons.
Thank you all. Thank you. I love you all. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Robert.
God bless you all.
Love you too, and give love to your wife.
I'll do that. Thank you.